Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, May 17th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I am the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Reich, Councilmember Gordon, and Councilmember Goodman. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 5 items on today's agenda, including 5 quasi-judicial hearings. Before we get into our hearings, we'll handle the consent agenda. There's only one item today, which is correcting the title and legal language of the resolution regarding an alley vacation for the Minneapolis public schools. Are there any questions or comments from candidate members, from committee members on this item? Seeing none, I will move item 5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We will now take on item number 1, quasi-judicial hearing, considering an appeal submitted by Alyssa Lupke-Peer on behalf of David Potter and Darwin Lookingbill regarding the decision of the Zoning and Planning Board of Adjustments denying the variance to reduce the required corner side yard from 8 feet to 1 foot and to 2 3/4 inches to allow for an open covered porch extending 9 feet from the house at 1800 4th Street Northeast. And we'll begin with the staff presentation. While you're getting ready to let the record reflect that we've been joined by Council President Bender.
Good morning, Committee Chair Schrader, Council members. The item before you is an appeal of the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment to deny a variance for the corner side yard. As a bit of background on this site, it is a 55-foot wide, 9,000 square foot lot in the R2B district. Newly permitted duplex was built there starting in January 2017. During a routine inspection, one of our inspectors noticed a patio in the midst of construction that had not been on the approved plans, and the applicants decided to move forward pursuing a variance for a porch in that location. Porches are a permitted obstruction in the corner side yard as long as they do not extend more than 8 feet from the house and are not closer than 5 feet to the corner side lot line. The proposed porch extends 9 feet from the house and is within 1 foot, 2 3/4 inches of the side lot line. Prior to the construction, the site was vacant. It served as a driveway for the Police Federation office. As noted, it is a wider and larger than normal lot for the city of Minneapolis. There's a very minor grade change across the site. Ultimately, staff and the Board of Adjustment were unable to find practical difficulties unique to the circumstances of the lot that were not created by the applicant. With regards to the second finding, we were not able to find that a porch within 1 foot, 2 3/4 inches of the lot line was a reasonable use of the property that was in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The intent of the ordinance is to separate uses and to provide for orderly development. With regards to the third finding, the effect on health, safety, and welfare of this and neighboring properties, staff and the Board of Adjustment found that this would have no effect. So we were able to meet the third finding. Given that we and the staff and the board were unable to meet the first and second findings, staff recommends that the committee deny the appeal and uphold original staff recommendations and the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you very much. Before I open the hearing, we'll give the applicant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Is there a representative here to speak? If you could state your name and address for the record.
David Potter. I'm one of the owners at 1800 4th Street Northeast. With me is my husband, Darwin Lookingbill, who is the other owner of the bottom unit. Thank you, council members, for a chance to talk to you this morning about this issue of a porch variance. I want to be brief and really only have 3 points to make that are more practical than they are in terms of absolute findings. My first point that I make is when we bought this lot, and it was a vacant lot, it had a railroad line across back in the day, and it was a service road for a rail line. It had never been built on. And when we bought it, it had unique circumstances that were there already. And the biggest unique circumstance, which had a lot of positives and a couple challenges, was the bike route that goes along the south side of the lot all the way from the beginning to end. The challenge specifically was the lack of an alley access and that bike path, unless we wanted to try to convince you all to let a bike route where we have a driveway go across the bike route, was that we could not place a garage in the back of the lot as we wanted to. There was simply no way to build a two-family duplex and put it in the back. That caused us to put the garage in the front, and that left the only place for a street-facing patio or porch to be on the south side. Now, the positive of that same bike route that we didn't create, it was there when it was there, is that, one, we like bike routes. We bike a lot, and it's great to be there. But two, even though we're building a normal side porch, the side of our porch, the one that is proposed to this committee, is still 12 feet back from the edge of the bike route. That is double, more than double the normal 5-foot setback for porches. And most importantly, and if you go up and down and if you look in your electronic docket, you're going to find that there are lots of structures, buildings, driveways that are closer than 12 feet back. And that's, I think, what makes this within the spirit of the variance. The second point I want to make is that this isn't just important to us. We built this to be part of the Northeast community, and being able to be outside facing the streets and talking to our neighbors is important. But my second point is it's important to the neighborhood. I looked a little bit yesterday afternoon at I don't know if you call it an electronic agenda or a docket or what you call it, but two of the letters of our neighbors that enthusiastically support this porch weren't in there, and I think we've tried to get copies to the clerk of the letters from our neighbor to the north, Rob Ellert, and our neighbor directly to the east, Bob Dykey. And in addition to that, we have the support of the neighborhood association, and we have people down the street who've gone out of their way once they got notice of it. People we didn't know. We got to meet some people through this process saying this is important to them, and it's important for one specific reason. To them, it's important to have eyes on the street. To them, it's important to have new neighbors interact with the neighborhood. And to them, a side porch, as opposed to some other type of a porch, is the only way to make that happen. And I don't know if you all know, it's a great street to be on, but it has a nice little parade every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night as people move from Mazelak's to Grumpy's and stop at Jimmy's along the way. And so for our neighborhood, it is something important to them. And that brings me to my third point. I think you heard them say that this divided board couldn't find that there were unique circumstances we didn't create. If you look at the record, nobody addresses, they talk about, hey, you built a house that had patio doors here. Nobody addresses or challenges the fact we couldn't put a garage in the back, and that the only place we could put a porch would be on the side or in the back. The second point of it's not a reasonable use, the point I would make is what we're left with, if options, if you don't grant this variance, is either an ornamental side porch, a little narrow porch that looks like kind of a French door porch that you'd see on an apartment that nobody's going to be able to use, and the neighborhood will not have eyes on the street. Or we can put a porch at the back of the duplex, and whoever comes over can look at the parking lot of the Police and Firemen's Union, which is a nice parking lot, but still will not put eyes on the street. And so I think if you look at the spirit of why there are variances, we don't cause any problems in terms of the use of this, in terms of the enjoyment of this. Our neighbors want this. We're not close to anything. We're 12 feet back from the bike route. I would urge the council to, or the committee to use its judgment in a divided board decision that this is the time for a variance. With me is Alyssa Peer, who's helped us design the porch, and Peter Crane, who actually built the duplex. If you have questions Darwin and I can answer or can't answer, maybe they can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now open the hearing to the public, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked with the clock that's over by the clerk. Would any members of the public like to speak? Anybody interested in speaking? Anyone interested in speaking? All right, thanks.
So I'm Carol Clark. I live at 1705 4th Street Northeast. Northeast is a really tricky neighborhood. We have a lot of street traffic. Some of it is wonderful. Some of it is a little scary. And so having a porch that has eyes on the street is huge in improving the neighborhood communication and livability. And where he is, it's not like the variance is going to be an issue for his next door neighbor because it's the bike path. So it's completely different than a house that's right next door. So I think that you should approve it. And that's all I've got to say. So there. And other neighbors who didn't have the time to come down here to speak are absolutely, there's nobody in the block that has an issue with it. So there you go.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to close the public meeting. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to move approval of the appeal and ask staff to draft findings of fact consistent with the hardship based on what the applicant stated.
Thank you. Councilmember Ike.
Thank you. I appreciate my colleague's motion. I support that. And just vouching for the uniqueness of the site, it is in fact an old rail spur that serviced actually an old elevator factory, if you really want to dig in the ghosts of the past of that area. And it's not just a path, it's actually a physically separated trail, part of our trail system that we're trying to develop and connect with North Minneapolis eventually, once we get across that river. And so, yeah, it's a very unique circumstance. And as we've granted several different porches for several different developments in this very same manner, which actually encroach significantly closer and do not provide the same separation and protection that these builders did on their own behalf with their own dollar to actually separate, but still be visibly connected to the path. The other ones actually encroach and they're physically right there. So if you're ever wavering on that path, watch out for those porches and the development just down the street. You might hit your head. So in any event, I concur with my colleague and support the motion before us.
Thank you. I really appreciate the background. Any other of my colleagues? If not, Councilmember Goodman's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We'll now move on to our second quasi-judicial hearing, which is considering the appeal submitted by Stephen Verdorn regarding the 4 decisions of the City Planning Commission to construct a new 41-unit residential building located at 3612 through 3616 Bryant Avenue South, subject to conditions. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Okay, we're going to go old school today. Good morning, Chair Schrader and council members. This is an appeal filed by the property owner who lives at 905 West 36th Street. Just to show you the property in question where the proposed development is at 3612 and 16 Bryant Avenue South, and the appellant lives at this property just north of the site. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 41-unit residential building. The site is zoned C1. This was heard at the April 23rd, 2018 City Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission did adopt staff recommendations to approve the project. As part of that staff recommendation, there was a denial from staff on the variance of the south side yard setback for the balconies. We did approve the variance for the building itself down to 11 feet, but we did recommend denial, and the Planning Commission upheld that recommendation to deny the balconies. So that is not part of the project before you. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing one-story Volunteers of America office building that sits on the site and its accessory parking lot. They are proposing to construct a 4-story building. However, technically the building will be 5 stories in height, as a portion of this underground garage is greater than 12 feet. So for zoning code definition purposes, it is a 5-story building. However, when you view the building from the street, it is a 4-story building. There's a significant grade change in that northwest corner of the lot that makes that garage wall need to project above grade more than 12 feet for a portion of the wall. The units in the building will range between studio and 2-bedroom units, and the applicant is proposing 20 parking spaces and then 21 bicycle parking spaces within the 1 level of the underground garage. The applications, the first application was a conditional use permit to increase height from the 2.5 stories, 35 feet, to 5 stories or 50 feet. Staff found that the proposed height would be compatible with the surrounding area. Buildings range between 1 and 7 stories in height. The adjacent house duplex, is a 2.5 story. And the buildings north of the site are all 1 stories. However, all of those properties are pushed up to 36th Street. And so there is a lot of yard and space between the proposed development or the property line and then those structures. The surrounding areas, you can see also from the zoning map, all of the R5 would allow a 4-story or 56-foot high building. So for those reasons, we recommended approval of the conditional use permit to increase height. The second application is a variance to increase the maximum permitted floor area ratio from 2.04, which includes a density bonus for enclosed parking, to 2.38. The difference in the amount of development that could be constructed is 3,720 square feet. So that is the increase that they are asking for with the variance. The site is designated as mixed use in the future land use map. It's located in a neighborhood commercial node and also on a community corridor. Those features encourage more intensive residential development, and for those reasons, we did recommend approval of that variance. The third application was for site plan review, the third application was for a south interior side yard setback. And again, the required setback is 13 feet because of that garage level makes it a story, so it goes up to 13. If you looked at the building from Bryant as a 4-story building, the required setback would be 11, but because of that grade change, again, it increases the south side yard setback by 2 additional feet. And again, they had originally requested a variance of the balconies, which we did deny, and the applicant I don't know if they supported the variance, but they are in agreement with our recommendation to deny that variance. And so the practical difficulty is that grade change and then that additional 2 feet for the level of the building that's technically below grade. And so we did recommend approval of that application. The last application then was site plan review. The only item of alternative compliance that was needed, meaning that they met all of the site plan review standards, was for a front yard setback. The Chapter 530 requires that buildings be located within 8 feet unless subject to a greater setback. The required setback, because of that duplex to the south, is this area in here, and then the rest of the building technically should move up to 8 feet. But so as to create a uniform front of the building, we recommended that alternative compliance be granted to allow the entire building to be set back 15 feet. Outside of the required yard, though, there is a proposed patio that's in that 15 feet. So for those reasons, we did recommend approval of that application, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe that this is on the Bryant Avenue corridor is a rapid transit corridor. And so could you tell us how many parking spaces are required in a building of this size on a transit corridor?
Because it's less than 50, there are no required parking spaces, and they are providing 20.
And I believe that was in response to feedback that they got at a number of neighborhood organization meetings. Is that right? The original proposal did not have any parking, and then it was added in response to neighbor questions and concerns.
I believe I read that, but I would let the applicant confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I open the hearing, I'll give the applicant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Is there a representative here to speak? Applicant, excuse me. Oh, yeah, sorry. If you can say your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Jeff Hall, and together with Alex Geese and Sean Sweeney, we are the three owners of the property. My address is 4500 Drexel Avenue in Edina. Thank you for your time this morning. The current building is from the 50s and obsolete and has significant asbestos and actually some toxic vapors in the soil. So as part of the redevelopment, we are cleaning up and remediating the soil and the building. The previous owner was a nonprofit, so we're happy that this property will start to contribute to the tax base in the city. We're excited to invest in this neighborhood and this property. Obviously, there are fantastic bars and restaurants and shops and Bogart's Donuts nearby, and it's all walkable. The proximity to Uptown and the lakes is terrific, and the Bryant Transit Corridor and Bikeway are great attractions. And obviously, you know, there's tremendous demand for such amenities and such location. A 41-unit building helps to address the missing middle, kind of a medium density building, consistent with a comprehensive plan, bringing more housing options to a commercial node, and responds again to the tremendous demand in the area. The three owners, we have significant development experience. We're excited to bring that to this property, to have a very professionally managed property, and to be a good neighbor. And we are long-term owners, so we're not there to build something and flip. And we'll be there quite a bit. We all live nearby, and we're excited to be part of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Councilmember Bender.
Could someone from the team answer my question about the parking that I asked of staff?
Yeah, you know, we actually planned, we anticipated the parking demand was an issue, so we had planned that from the beginning. But it's an additional $500,000 that we're spending to provide that parking. Based on similar buildings within that area, some of those buildings aren't even using the parking that they built because many people don't have cars. So we intend to really encourage our tenants to take advantage of the transitway and the bikeway. And a lot of kids, like, you know, even my daughter doesn't want a car these days. They want to use the ride services and public transport to the best of their ability. And there's an hour car a couple blocks away too. So lots of good options.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But you did get a bonus for putting in the underground parking. It looks like you're getting an FAR bonus to do it. So it wasn't exactly like you did it for $500,000 and got nothing, right? I mean, I heard this planner
Yeah, we got
say,
a bonus for that. Yeah.
right. So is there an option to make the building take 3,000 square feet out and eliminate the parking?
Take 3,000 square feet out.
I mean, which is the more pressing question to the neighbors, I guess, not having parking or less height?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you could have built a smaller building
We
and
could have-
had no parking, which I completely support, or you could have a taller building and put in the parking, which is making it bigger. I'm just kind of curious what your opinion is about that, because you did get a bonus to do it.
Well, with respect to the FAR bonus, if you take out the parking, that doesn't count into gross floor area that determines FAR. So we'd still need then we'd be asking for an FAR variance. The building would be shorter in the rear of the building, but they're trying to balance, you know, what is perceived and potential parking demand with a transit-oriented development.
And can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Carol Lansing. I'm an attorney at Faegre Baker Daniels, 90 South 7th Street, and I'm working with the developers on this project. I wanted to address just some of the findings and the key points from the findings. First, the project height and density are consistent with the city's comprehensive plans and the purpose of the ordinances that regulate those. I put up the zoning map because this shows you that while this is at the edge of a C1 district, it is surrounded by R5 and this node R6. And in those areas, this height and FAR would be allowed as of right as the project is designed. It also distinguishes this C1 node from many others in the city that are surrounded by low density zoning, R1, R2B type of zoning, where an increase of height to 4 stories or more would be out of character with the surrounding development. This is in character with the height of the older apartment buildings across the street and across the alley, and with the what the zoning allows around it. It's hard to see on this. There's also footprints of buildings that show you that these older apartment buildings and the development pattern for setbacks is also similar or even less setback than is proposed for this site. With respect to the setback requirement, the south setback requirement would only be 11 feet if this was recognized as a 4-story building, but as Hillary explained to you, it is technically a 5-story building for that kind of unique circumstance with the grade. Also then, with respect to character of the area, this perspective shows you how the front of the building is 3 stories with the 4th story setback, so that the height and massing is very similar and complementary to the older apartment buildings across the street and the streetscape in this location. As I noted in my letter, whenever you do taller buildings, denser buildings than what was there before, there will be different impacts on neighbors and residents. That is inherent in our desire to grow the city and densify the city. It's in appropriate locations, and this is one because of the zoning and development pattern. So unfortunately, that is a change that people may not enjoy, but is something that is overall, we believe, beneficial to the city. With respect, just wanted to comment on the traffic in the alley. The garage door is going to be 18 feet wide. It's going to be set back 3 feet. There will be room for cars to pull out, and they don't have to back out of this garage. They can pull out front to see cars coming in the alley. And with respect to drainage, stormwater management will be improved on the site. There'll be no more stormwater running off onto neighboring properties than occurs now. So in conclusion, we hope that you will affirm Planning Commission decisions, and we are here for any additional questions.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given the context of the zoning that allows for taller and larger buildings on the mid-block than at the commercial node, why didn't the project apply for a rezoning that would have allowed a much bigger building at the corner than this one?
We did discuss with staff whether to rezone to R5, in which case we wouldn't have needed the height or the FAR applications. It is within the designated commercial node, and there was an interest in maintaining the potential for commercial mixed use on this site. The community room in the front of the building could conceivably become a retail or commercial space.
Thank you. Now that we heard from the applicant, I'd love to give the appellant a chance to speak. No, thank you. And if you could say your name and address for the record, please.
Certainly. My name is Stephen Verdorn. I live at 905 West 36th Street. That is the property just north of the proposal. If I may, thank you to the Minneapolis Zoning and Planning Committee for your time, for allowing us the opportunity to appeal the proposed project at 3612, 3616 Bryant Avenue South. I have submitted the appeal on behalf of my wife, our neighbors, and myself. We intend to show evidence that 1, granting the requested CUP variances and site plan approval are inconsistent with the required findings per existing code. 2, the applicant failed to demonstrate practical difficulties unique to this property. 3, granting the CUP and variances causes undue harm to neighboring properties and residents in the area in terms of loss of light, air, privacy, peace and quiet, diminished property values, and most importantly, public safety. Item 1, the granting of CUP variances and site plan approval are inconsistent with the required findings as per existing code. Increasing the height from 2.5 to 5 stories will adversely affect the use and enjoyment of neighboring properties and will adversely impact normal and orderly development of surrounding uses for properties permitted in this district. The height of the building stated in the CUP does not accurately reflect what the architect has stated on 2 separate occasions, that the actual height of the building is 57 feet. The staff report is inaccurate. On page 2, items 1 and 2, relating to the required findings of the CUP, both items refer to 50 feet as the height of the building. Additionally, 57 feet is currently higher than what is allowed in R5 zoning. The increased height of the building and variances are being used to unfairly increase the project's rentable units and therefore developer profit and increase density with disregard for the spirit of the code, the small lot size, the disproportionate increase in residents, inadequate off-street parking will cause harm to existing neighbors. The C1 district is intended as a convenient shopping environment of small retail sales and commercial services that are compatible with adjacent residential uses. The permitted residential uses include single-family homes and multifamily dwellings up to 4 units. As proposed, the project seeks to impact, sorry. As proposed, the project seeks to increase the, I'm sorry, allow me to gather myself.
Oh, not a problem.
The permitted residential uses by 5 times. Let me repeat that. As proposed, the project seeks to repeat the increase of permitted residential uses by 5 times and provides no retail. The increased height and mass of the structure allowed by the CUP will significantly reduce sunlight and air to our yard, garden, and house, all to the detriment and reduced enjoyment of our property. Incredibly, and without notice, the side yard setback requirements in C1 districts was reduced to 0 in 2017. This project does not comply with the purpose for which this amendment was authorized, to create a street wall. Item 2, the applicant failed to demonstrate practical difficulties unique to this property. This is a well-located property on a standard rectangular city lot with not unusual amount of grade change in one corner of the property. The grade on the northern property line is arguably flat from the northwest corner to nearly 2/3 of the way across the street side lot, across the north side lot line. This means that the elevation from the backyards of the 2 property owners to the north will sit nearly 60 feet below the height of the proposed building. Neither the applicant nor staff identified any difficulties that would prevent developers from creating a reasonably scaled, profitable residential project on this site. The city's current zoning outlines specific height and density standards for good reasons, and as adjoining property owners and neighbors, we should be able to rely on these standards. Granting such extreme variances from the code seems arbitrary and does not appear to be motivated by the conditions of this individual site or any excessive challenges that following the approved code would create. Item 3, the granting of this CUP and variance causes undue harm to the neighboring properties and residents in the nearby area in terms of loss of light, air, privacy, peace and quiet, diminished property values, and public safety. The height, mass, and density changes that are recommended for approval allow for the construction of a bulky, too tall building, which would add too many residents on too small of a site. The additional building height allowed by the CUP would reduce sunlight to our backyard garden by over 30%. The architect admitted the shadow study was conducted at street level. Therefore, shadowing impact of the north and west properties as indicated in the plan is not accurate and would allow even less sunlight to reach north side residents and backyards than currently shown in the plans. During winter months, our almost zero sunlight will reach our south facing windows of our home. The effects of this construction would have extreme, long-lasting negative impacts on our adjacent properties and the neighborhood at large. The smaller home to the south, the row of houses beyond, would be dwarfed by nearly 20 feet by a building set back only 11 feet from the lot line. Access to sun, air, and privacy will be diminished. This building is also more than 10 feet closer to Bryant Avenue than the Bonifaci home, further diminishing the view and light and the ability to rent the upstairs to tenants. In fact, the current tenant has already given notice to leave due to this project. My wife and I, other neighbors to the north, will exceedingly and adversely be impacted by the granting of this CUP in various and similar ways. We will be towered over by a nearly 60-foot wall to the south, from which will protrude 16 or more balconies with less than 4 feet from the property line. It will negate the value of improvements made, and owners will be disinclined to make further future property improvements. Balconies pose a safety concern to adjacent side properties and increase the possibility of neighborhood tension. Noise and light trespassing will further diminish privacy and peaceful enjoyment of backyards. The enjoyment of our property will permanently and irretrievably be diminished. The busy and narrow alley and near blind exit onto 36th Street will become even ever more traffic and dangerous by 20 additional cars using it to access the new garage. In fact, just last week, I witnessed a near collision between a motorist and a grandfather trying to walk his baby and stroller on the sidewalk. This particular motorist had to lock up their brakes to avoid a serious accident. This very much concerns me. I've also experienced this myself walking my dogs, as many of my neighbors have. Our real estate expert has advised us that additional height and building mass will diminish the property value as much as 20 to 25%. In conclusion, the surrounding neighborhood as a whole will be negatively impacted by these 41 units, jammed into a too small site with a surrounding infrastructure unprepared to support it. Negative impacts on neighborhood character, parking, pedestrian and cyclist safety, noise, light pollution, trash, and the provision of essential emergency services and snow removal will result. We believe that the CUP variances and the site plan approval were granted contrary to required findings and over the rights and valid concerns of current property owners and community members. These decisions disregard the city's own zoning regulations and rules regarding conditional permitting and variances. Please stick to the code and allow a project here that does not require variances and a CUP where the findings cannot be satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions, and thank you for being here today. I will now open the hearing to the public. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, which again will be tracked by with the timer near the clerk. Would any members of the public like to speak? Come on up. And please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Cian Klug, and I live at 905 West 36th Street. Thank you to the Zoning and Planning Committee for allowing us this opportunity to state our appeal. We use our backyard daily, even in the winter. Our overall health and well-being are threatened due to the loss of light and sunshine that will occur if a 57-foot building is placed in our backyard. The shadowing study from the architect is misleading. During the summer, access to sunshine in our backyard will be greatly reduced. During summer months, almost zero sunlight will reach the south-facing windows of our home. We had an architect draw up an actual shading study in our backyard showing a 35-foot building, which is the approved zoning, and how that would affect the back of our house in December on the winter solstice at noon. Okay, and you can see the shadow comes to approximately halfway up our basement foundation. However, if you look at what a 57-foot building would do to our shading on the back of our house, you can see here the shadowing happens all the way up to our upper floor, allowing a little bit of sunlight to touch our bathroom window and our back bedroom at the top of our house, and that is at noon. There are thousands of studies that point to the negative effects of inadequate light on our physical and mental health. Second, balconies pose a safety risk to adjacent side properties. These balconies don't add eyes on the street. In fact, this area is secluded due to tree coverage and houses blocking most views of the street. Not only does this increase opportunity for bad behavior by tenants, but as a result of the elevated vantage point, it poses a potential risk to myself, my family, my friends, and our 2 dogs.
Thank you very much.
Can I just conclude?
No, we're pretty strict on the 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to speak? Thanks. Come on up.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Emily Bonifaci. I lived right immediately to the south of the site. I'm in that duplex and I live there. So first of all, again, thank you so much for hearing our concerns about this. I just want to state that my background is in affordable housing and I'm a landscape architect. And I am all in favor of density and infill and smart housing that's close to jobs. And I bike to work and I love busing. So I'm not opposed to infill. But I want to make sure that as we move forward as a city that we're doing it in a really calculated, smart way. And I want the community and the neighbors to understand that the city is going to listen to them and their concerns and make sure that they're not losing value in their rights as homeowners while we progress into the future in this city. So I want to make sure that this density is done in the right way. Personally, I think, again, that the variance does not meet the needs of the city's own requirements, that it overcomes practical difficulties. Again, it's adversely impacting us. And unfortunately, actually, my home is only 2 stories, not 2.5. So it would be dwarfed by nearly 20 feet to the property immediately to the north, plus what Cian and Steve have said there as well. And again, my tenants have already left with concerns about privacy. This would be 14 units looking right into my bedroom windows, my backyard, and my bathroom. It's simply cramming 41 units onto a site that is roughly about twice the size of my own property. The approved variances are just going to create too negative an impact. A lot of traffic and impact on pedestrian and cyclist safety. And it's simply just too bulky and tall of a building for the proposed site. As I said, I'm not opposed to a residential development there. I just want to make sure that it's done in a smart way that respects the rights and the privacy and value of the current homeowners. So please consider allowing less height and density for this property. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Gene Ross. I live at 3624 Bryant, 1 door down from this proposed project. And in case you don't recognize my little prop here, it's from the movie Up. I'm starting to feel like the old curmudgeon in the animated film who lost his wife and continued to live in his home for years until it was completely surrounded by high-rises. He comes up with the plan to move his home by tying balloons around it and floating it to an idyllic spot that he and his wife had visited when they were young. I wish I could do that too, because I foresee the city's current plan to continue building these high-density micro-unit apartment buildings, ruining the character and livability of our neighborhood. I was at one of the public hearings for the new 2040 comprehensive plan, and a city planner there accused property owners of being selfish for wanting to keep their neighborhoods livable and workable for everybody. I think it is arrogant and completely tone deaf to take this stance and to continue to cater to the developers whose projects attract millennials to our city who have never lived here before. To try to frame it as homeowners against renters is false. I have 44 letters here that I got in 2 days which include longtime renters, small business owners, and property owners. We are all asking the city to stick to the existing codes with no conditional use permits to keep this proposed project in scale. And I would like to also point out that stating that only the back of this building is 5 stories is completely duplicitous. 90% of the back of this building is 5 stories tall, and one little area is 4 stories tall. Okay?
Thank you. And your 2 minutes are up.
And I would like to say that safety in our alley is a big concern. 6-foot setback would allow for us to not have vehicle accidents in our alley when people are zooming up to 36th Street to try to get out of the deep hole there.
Thank you.
20
You're going
vehicles
to,
and the
excuse me,
space under the
your 2
parking
minutes
house.
are done.
This is the disrespect that I'm talking about.
No, well, I first also want to comment on that. Please, this is not a place for personal attacks on city staff or anyone of your neighbors. 2 minutes is what we allow for everyone. Thank you. Is anyone else interested in speaking?
Hi, my name is Jane O'Loughlin. I live at 4629 Colfax, 10 blocks from this development. I am here to speak in opposition of the plan. I have many concerns. Out of respect for your time, I'm going to try not to duplicate anything that's already been said, and I'm going to try to go really quickly here so I get under my 2 minutes. You've had time to review the report, so I hope what I'm saying is actually not new to you guys. Traffic at 36th and Bryant is already extremely congested. When the city called it a bike boulevard and later added the painted bike lanes, many of the residents in the neighborhood significantly decreased or quit using Bryant for biking or driving. We call it the anti-transit corridor because we used to use it. It's too congested with parking on both sides, MTC buses, bikes, delivery trucks, school buses, and a higher than average frequency of emergency vehicles at Walker. It isn't safe. I bike and drive on other streets whenever possible. The intersection at 36th and Bryant is service level F both direction already without any additional 41 unit. You may not know this because the city doesn't require a traffic analysis as a criterion for development, so one was not done. At the May 2nd East Harriet Farmstead Neighborhood Association meeting with the developers and Tina Erasmus and Ron Harris, I think his name was, a traffic impact study was formally requested by one of the meeting attendees. Tina promised one would be done. To my knowledge, none of us have seen it. So, one question out of many is, will the fire trucks even be able to get through, or will our homeowners insurance increase yet again because of response time changes strictly for fire safety? Number 2, the staff report is not accurate in multiple places, and many statements are without supporting documentation to justify the statement. So for a non-city planner, it's been very difficult to understand why any of these things are being done. The conditional use is consistent. So, sorry. On page 3, number 5, there's a point that says the conditional use is consistent with applicable policies. Oh, shoot.
You can finish your sentence. We're not
Okay. He called it a medium density. The 2009 city plan calls it a very high density at 164 DU versus what is approved, which is significantly less, like 114 to 44 DU versus 164. So this is not according to our plan. That this level of high density, it's actually very high density at 164 DU. So I'm opposed to that.
Thank you. Sir?
My name is David Wheeler. I live at 3625 Bryant Avenue South. Appeared before this group about 2 years ago, just 2 weeks after I had valve replacement surgery, and I was concerned about a building that went in next door at 3621 that was 4 stories but 50 feet high. And that is mentioned in the report in justifying the height of this new development. A couple other things I want to mention. The building that I live in is a condo. 5 of us own 5 different units in that condo. And 25 years ago, long before any of you served on this council, although pretty close to 25 years ago for one of you, the Walker Methodist Home wanted to buy up all those single-family houses and build big, huge buildings there. And the Planning Commission was smart enough to say, no, this is a neighborhood that counts and makes a difference. You're hearing that today from all the people who have come here to speak about how they feel about it. I'm in favor of development. We need more development. There's no question about it. What I'm concerned about is that there are variance after variance after variance. They continue to move on, and we're not requiring the builders to do things like build affordable housing. I want my neighborhood to look like my city. And these units are going to be far too expensive for people who come from lower incomes background. And I just think it's incumbent upon this planning commission, if you're really serious about racial equity, if you're really serious about low income housing, then you're going to build that into all the exceptions that you're giving to the developers. That's all I need to say. I'm done before time. Thanks.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Marie Morris. I live at 3749 Colfax Avenue South. I moved into this neighborhood about 2 years ago because I liked the walkability. I like the mix of houses. I'm right out the back door is a bus stop, which is really great. But I've noticed recently the congestion building in the neighborhood. I walked last night in the neighborhood on Colfax and 36th, and there wasn't one single spot available on that block. Cars were going around looking for spots, but there were no spots. I moved to this neighborhood hoping that it was going to be a diverse neighborhood and that there wouldn't be a problem with noise, air pollution, congestion, lack of parking. I initially had looked at going north of where I purchased, but some of those blocks are so congested you can't drive 2 cars down there. I thought my friends would never be able to park and come to my house. I own a duplex. This building is going to be a looming presence in the neighborhood. It's going to be so out of style with everything else that's there. Not even the smallest effort was made to blend it into the neighborhood. For generations, this will be there to remind us. We have a need for multi-housing. People have said that. I totally agree. But 41 units in a small space at a median income, if I have this correctly, of $1,500 a month doesn't seem like something we need. We don't have any affordable housing in that unit. And I just want to say that I'm really sorry for my neighbors. Jean started crying. It gets to me. But the people who live in the immediate proximity, I don't, are going to really experience a loss of privacy, sunlight, quiet, and significant property value. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Ren Jacobs. I live at 3640 Bryant, just right down the block from this new development. Hey, I'm an uptown girl. I love my city. But I was smart 25 years ago, and I just moved just 6 blocks south of that crazy Lake and Hennepin area because I wanted it to be a little bit more residential, right? A little bit more home ownership. I was raising some kids. Now it feels that all of the development that was going along on the Greenway is now inching south towards my area, and it is affecting things. Even if you try to get off the freeway on 31st Street from 35W going north, that 31st Street exit is so backed up because of all of the new development uptown, and that's the only exit that kind of works for it. Now it's inching into my neighborhood, and I am really concerned about it. I know that the developers think that this is a great investment because it is. It's a beautiful neighborhood. And I would like to kind of keep it that way. I'm very concerned about all of what's going on. When we talk about the alley exit, I wish you could see it because what it is when you're going, you have to go down a hill and up a hill, and then the street is right there. There's a fence, and so it's really dangerous because you have to speed up the hill, especially if it's winter, and then all of a sudden people are crossing and you don't see each other. So for 20 more cars going down there, down that alley, that is going to create a significant problem. When they said that they're going to encourage bike owners, anyone that can afford rent at that new apartment obviously has a car. Okay, they're going to have a car. They're going to have a bike too. They're going to bike in the summer. But let's face it, this is Minnesota. And you know, we need cars. It's going to be just crazy trying to find a spot on my lot. I just really want you to listen to the homeowners. This is kind of a sad thing that's happening. I'm all for development in my uptown area, but we got to keep it in scale. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking? Comment up.
Hello, my name is Joe Huber. I live in the Wedge at 2008 Bryant Avenue. I'm here today to ask you to deny the appeal. I support this project because our population is growing. We've added over 40,000 people since 2010. And if we're serious about housing affordability, we need to build more homes for the people that live here. And if we don't build projects in neighborhoods, especially in demand neighborhoods, new development will be pushed into neighborhoods that don't have as strong of networks to oppose developments or to ex-urban greenfield land. Urban housing really helps support a whole ecosystem of things. From the businesses that are in the neighborhood, I know they would love to have people buying coffee and donuts and pet food. And going to Gigi's Cafe. It also supports our existing mass transit and bike investments. This is a high-frequency bus corridor. It's really walkable, and I think it's only fair to, people to welcome new residents, to let them share in the beauty of our city. And this neighborhood is really in demand, and approving new development in a neighborhood isn't meant to be disrespectful. It's meant to share in the benefits that we really pride ourselves in a city. And I think this is a reasonable development. It's an urban housing in the urban center of the state, and it shouldn't be that controversial. So I ask you to deny the appeal and support the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else interested in speaking? Thank you. And if you can state your name and address.
My name is Tim Keane, Keane, and I am with QTAC Rock. I office at 60 South 6th Street, Minneapolis. I also reside at 5336 3rd Avenue in South Minneapolis. I'm here on behalf of Cian Plug and Steve Verdun, the appellants. I want to be clear that the appellants do not oppose development at this site. They support development that complies with the existing zoning regulations that were in place when they invested in their home. This project appears to be wrapped up in the illusory narrative that our city will be a better place with significant increases in density. And I say illusory because that density for density's sake argument has not been supported with empirical data or facts. The infrastructure of our city is not keeping up with the demands of our current residents. Witness 36 and Bryant. That intersection operates at level of service F many periods of the day. There's not a single critical aspect of our infrastructure that's not stressed by inadequate funding: transit, education, transportation, public works, parks. How are we going to support greater density when we can't support the residents we already have? Given the facts, the testimony, and evidence offered into the record in this appeal, I don't think any honest application of the findings can conclude that those additional standards under the CUP requirements are met, including access of light and air to surrounding properties, no adverse impact to enjoyment of adjacent properties. Finding number 2 under the additional CUP standards regarding the shadowing of residential properties. I'm wrapping up.
Thank you.
And the scale and character of surrounding uses. Please apply the facts to the findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council President, and members of this committee. I'm here on behalf of Alex in support of this project. I've known Alex for about 3 years, and I've been a patron of his businesses on multiple occasions and whatnot. And what I could say as a customer and also as a colleague of his is that he works really hard to make sure his employees are taken care of, and that he's a contributing member to his community, whether that be through the markets that he holds in his parking lots or some of the open houses he has when he's opening up a new business enterprise there. I think sometimes people in this audience may confuse the idea of some of the rent seeking that's taken place in the city, where we have developers that come in and only seek to profit on the growth and the wellness of the city and not give anything back. I've seen through Alex and his projects and with his other colleagues that they really invested in this community for a long run, and that they really make a point to be friends of their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else interested in speaking? Anyone else interested in speaking on this issue? Seeing no one, the public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will move to deny the appeal for all of the items, and I can speak to them. First, I want to say, I think that we're best served as a community when we focus the discussion about projects on the individual specifics of the project. And I've noticed a pattern where often in appeals we start to debate whether or not our city should grow, and it is growing. And we make a lot of statements, particularly in the community meetings that happened before this moment. There's kind of this debate about renters and neighbors, and it's just getting more and more heated, especially in the neighborhoods of Ward 10, where we are seeing a lot of growth pressure and development. And I just want to remind everyone that, I think those are important conversations, but then we have to make a decision about a specific project in a specific neighborhood on a specific street. And so I think sometimes they get conflated, and people are emotional about their homes and where they live in their neighborhoods, and that's all okay. But we're talking about one building on one, a couple parcels in a commercial district in Uptown that's on a rapid transit corridor in a very walkable part of town, which is on the same block as pretty tall buildings, the home that was referenced earlier, and which will continue to see more proposals for development and growth. The commercial corridor at this node has all single-story buildings, and there's over the next 10 or 20 years, there certainly will be many more proposals for new housing here if the housing market continues in the direction that it's going. And as a city, we have said we want to grow along commercial corridors and transit corridors. So the development community would likely look at our plans and say that this is the place that we've said we want to grow. Of course, we can change that if we'd rather not grow along transit corridors in a new comprehensive plan update. This is the kind of project that I often hear my constituents want. When a 6-story building is proposed that has over 100 units, people say we want smaller buildings that are more this scale. So the question is, how big should the building be in this spot? The developer could build this building if we denied the FAR variance. The rents would go up. So that's just a question for each of us to ask. I think that this project is well designed. We've heard from some neighbors in this neighborhood, in my entire ward. Everyone's tired of me hearing about this. My ward is 80% renter. There is a lot of support for new rental housing in my ward. I campaigned on that. I got elected twice on that issue. It's just a fact in the 10th ward. And you didn't hear those voices today, but they're out there in the community. So that's my position on this project. Again, I've moved to deny the appeal.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, the council president's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Finally, we'll be considering items 3 and 4 on the agenda. These are 2 separate appeals on the same project. Minnehaha Academy at 3100 West River Parkway. We'll take the staff presentation and public hearing together. Item 3 is considering an appeal submitted by Michelle Cody regarding 4 decisions of the City Planning Commission, and item 4 is considering an appeal submitted by Douglas Brathwaite regarding the decision of the City Planning Commission's condition of appeal 3 to the conditional use permit. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair, Council members. Good morning.
The next appeal, we have received 2 appeals for the same project. So the staff presentation will intend to cover the entire project and then speak about each of the individual appeals, including some additional changes to plans that we received just yesterday. And then the applicant will also speak to those revisions as well. The subject property is located at 3100 West River Parkway South. The existing land use is a high school serving grades 9 through 12. In August of 2017, an explosion occurred on the property where substantial portions of the structure were destroyed. Essentially, we were left with 2 remaining structures, which are referenced as existing building A and existing building C in the site plan. The applicant is proposing to construct an addition that links buildings A and C with a 1-story addition, and then there will be 2 3-story additions, as you can see on the site plan as well. In addition, the applicant is also proposing to reconfigure the parking lots. You can see from the aerial photography that currently on the east side of the property, there are 4 tennis courts, a loading zone, and parking spaces. And then on the west side of the school building, between the athletic facility and the building, there are existing off-street parking spaces as well. The new plan would reconfigure those 2 parking spaces. Parking would be located in approximately the same location, east and west of the existing building. The athletic facility would remain generally unchanged. There's some buildings in the northwest corner of the property that are referred to as the Northwest Conference Center. They have some administrative functions and are considered to be part of the same zoning lot. But essentially, it kind of operates separately from the high school, which is what we're reviewing today. The applicant made these revisions, or several revisions to the plan from its original submission, which originally included a 2-phase project. The second phase included a middle school. That's not before you today. It also substantially increased the off-street parking to meet the traffic concerns of the adjacent property owners and the neighborhood as a whole. This proposed parking plan would exceed the maximum parking requirements in the zoning code. However, the applicant is taking advantage of some non-conforming rights because the existing school is already non-conforming to that maximum off-street parking. On April 23rd, the City Planning Commission adopted staff findings and approved the following applications for the property. First was a conditional use permit, and that was to allow for additions to the existing K-12 school. The second was a conditional use permit to increase the maximum height of the proposed addition. So for the addition, it was increased from 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet, to 4 stories, 53 feet, 8 inches. Should say that this is a building with 3 floors, but because of the floor heights, it measured out to become a 4-story building. And then additionally, there is a steeple that was, the conditional use permit was approved to increase the maximum height, again, from 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet to 64 feet. There was also a variance required to allow for the new parking reconfiguration, if you will, on the east and west sides of the structure. So we have front property lines along West River Parkway and also along 46th Avenue South. 32nd Street East is a corner side yard setback. So locating any parking between the principal structure and the front lot lines, so either east or west of the existing building, would trigger that variance. And then lastly, site plan review to allow for the additions to the existing school. Staff has received 2 appeals for the proposed project, both from neighborhood representatives. The applicant was in agreement with the conditions of approval for the Planning Commission actions and did not appeal the application. The first appeal is, I believe, item number 4 on today's agenda, was an appeal of the entire project. So that would be all 4 of the applications I've just mentioned. The second appeal was from the property owner at 3100 47th Avenue South. It was related to a specific condition of approval, condition number 3, for the conditional use permit. At the time that the application was reviewed and received by the applicant, and several of the neighbors and the applicant formed a task force to identify areas where we could find compromise to meet neighborhood concerns, and then also allow for the proposed additions to move the high school back onto the property. A gate was identified as being something that was desirable to the property owners north of 47th Avenue South to prevent vehicle access from to and from the site for loading vehicles, and then also for student and faculty parking. So originally we had a survey and a site plan identifying an incorrect location of the property line. So when the Planning Commission approved that condition of approval, we understood the property line was located here and therefore an allowed location for the gate. Since the Planning Commission decision was made, we have identified that it's actually gate would be located in the middle of 47th Avenue South, which is a public street. Therefore, the north property line would be located here in its present location. If the applicant were to come back in the future, for example, to allow for a gate in that location, there are two potential remedies. One would be an encroachment permit through the Public Works Department. The other would be an additional street vacation to vacate more of 47th Avenue South, thereby making it private property, and the applicant would be able to adjust the gate. The property owner at 3100 47th Avenue South, which is shown here on the site plan, has asked that through the appeal, a gate in that location would be detrimental to his property. He has concerns about creating a dead-end location where vehicles would have to utilize his driveway in order to maneuver. And then he was concerned that the condition of the public sidewalk then becomes an issue with multiple vehicles traveling on it, and therefore he has asked that the gate remain in its present location, including with the conditions of approval before you today if the application were to be approved. So the second appeal really is just related to the gate and ensuring that its location would only be allowed to be located here. Staff has received a substantial amount of public comment for the proposed project. Projects have included comments such as the traffic and parking. The proposed enrollment is expected to increase from 350, which was as of the school year last attended, and at the maximum would be up to 400 or 540 students. Included in your packet today and part of the analysis by the City Planning Commission was a draft travel demand management plan. So any requirements for if the application were approved, staff has included that condition of approval, and the City Planning Commission adopted that any findings out of the travel demand management plan to decrease single occupancy vehicle and do more of a multimodal or mode balance would be encouraged. So if the application were to be approved, both CPED and Public Works staff would finalize that travel demand management plan after the fact as part of the application, and it would have to be adhered to prior to any permit issuance. Let's see. Other concerns for the project relate to the location of the proposed development on the site. The site is located in the Mississippi River Critical Area Overlay, which you can see identified in gray. Essentially, that critical area boundary terminates where 47th Avenue previously was located prior to the street vacation in 2001. A little lighter on the site, you can see the defined boundary of the shoreland overlay. So the subject property is located in those two overlay districts. However, none of the proposed construction would occur that conflicts with anything related to those two overlay districts. So for example, the conditional use permit to increase height is based on the fact that it's located in the R1 single family district, not because it's located in the shoreland overlay district. The new rules for the Mississippi River Critical Area were published in December 27th of 2016 at the state level. Implementation of that plan will be phased over time. So the first step would be for the city of Minneapolis to adopt these new rules as part of our policy plan within our comprehensive plan. So that would go forward with the rest of Minneapolis 2040 to Met Council for review. later this year, and then adoption for early 2019. So because the city of Minneapolis has not updated the existing land use controls, the existing regulatory framework is in place and relevant for today's discussion. The applicant has provided an updated site plan and renderings, which I'll show in just a moment. I imagine they'll probably go into these changes as well during their portion of the presentation, but at a high level. The number of parking stalls is now at about 209 parking spaces for the public school, or I'm sorry, the private school, and then 20 parking stalls devoted to the Northwest Conference Center. The steeple, which you can see here in the rendering, has been reduced in height to 59 feet 6 inches to match the existing clock tower on the site. The west parking lot has also been updated to, sorry, wrong direction. Apologize. 5 trees have been saved where they were previously proposed to be removed to allow for the increase in the parking area. The exterior materials of the addition have been changed to brick, where they were a composite siding that was equivalent to a cement-based siding previously. The applicant also has some additional comments related to the use of the parking lot and how parking will be assigned to both students and staff. They've also agreed to reduce the truck size. Presently, there's semis that come to the site for food deliveries. Those will be reduced to 2-axle 26-foot box trucks. And then also they're confirming the location of the gate that would prevent access to and from 47th Avenue South, and they have a plan for how they intend to do that for the loading. So to just note, the Northwest Conference Center and the loading zone would be north of that proposed gate because the gate would be located right at the edge of the north property line where it exists today, where 47th Avenue South, the street easement is directly north of that. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Oh, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Before I open the public hearing, I'll give the appellants the opportunity to speak to the committee. We'll start with item 3, which is the appellant presented by Michelle Cody. Is the applicant or representative here to speak?
My name is Michelle Cody. I live at 3236 48th Avenue South. I'm not speaking just for myself. I'm speaking on behalf of neighbors and other stakeholders, and we call ourselves Rebuild Responsibly Community Task Force. Rather than going through this rather dense appeal, we'll use a more graphic approach. Our request is to deny the conditional use permit and the variances and overturn the decision of the Planning Commission. I think Shanna's done a nice job of laying out all the different things that have been brought to bear on this design. Let's take a look at the lot size. It is listed as 10.6 acres. They also own the 2 buildings shown in red, and that takes them to 10.9 acres, just to give you a sense for the scale and the size of the lot. The key elements of the appeal rest on the protection of the environment, really. That's it. The protection of the Mississippi River Critical Corridor, and protection of this ultimately falls to you, the Planning Commission, elected, and staff. There's been no real in-depth analysis regarding the elements of the CUPs or the variances, and we will speak to that. And then last, the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan, which of course is something that people adhere to. We will speak to the fact that that has not been adhered to. And a comment we'll bring up at the end is sort of timing. Minnehaha Academy has had the benefit of 35 design sessions that was put in the Star Tribune in March. We've had really, truly about 20 days of discussion roughly a month and a half of awareness. Let's start with what's the Mississippi River Critical Corridor Act. The Mississippi River Critical Corridor is 72 miles from north of Minneapolis up by Ramsey all the way down to south of Hastings, and it goes about 1,000 feet in on either side of the river. This is a protected area. It was enacted 45 years ago, but ultimately put into place almost 40 years ago through an Executive Order 7919. It now is overseen by the DNR for roughly the last 23 years. The DNR has adopted permanent rules related to the critical corridor, including what structure heights should be. In the DNR documents, this is called the River Neighborhood. It's 35 feet. It's consistent with R1 zoning. So what is a critical corridor? It provides a general regulatory framework for protected specific areas of the state that possess important historic, cultural, or aesthetic values or natural systems. The Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan and the Draft 2040 Plan also refer to this, and they say in the lower gorge where Minnehaha Academy is located, the predominant visual feature should be trees and bluffs. Friends of the Mississippi, a local group that has been used extensively by the DNR primarily to host meetings and bring in public comment, has been very clear about this. The height limits are 35 feet are clearly spelled out in state law. They also wrote that the maximum height should be directly tied to the corridor, not related to zoning, because zoning can change without the DNR's input. And last, but very important, this is the largest bird migratory route in the continental U.S. It is internationally well known, supporting 350 plus species of birds twice a year. This is what it looks like. So Minnehaha Academy, you can see, I'll use the cursor here. So this is the whole area right in here. And the area in yellow is where the critical corridor is and where the rules should be enforced. It goes all the way to the far east side of the soccer field. As Shanna mentioned, some of the buildings have come down as a result of the tragedy last August. Those are the ones marked in X, that general area. This is the proposed structure that was in the city plan. It includes what they call phase 2, which is alive and well, and that includes what they call the middle school. So that basically replaces the buildings that came down. The massive structure that's being proposed is shown very close to the river. The conditional use permit for height goes against these different elements. We'll speak to many of these. The staff findings that the proposed high school is consistent with the historic height doesn't satisfy the element of the ordinance. Instead, the element asks the city to assess if the conditional use will be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. We submit that it does. The report does not effectively communicate how different this project is when compared to what was there previously in terms of height, mass, and placement. The lack of analysis is rather stunning. In addition, the height is dramatically out of scale, as each story is roughly 14 feet high. So for a project that is considered to be 3 stories, that'd roughly be 35, 36 feet. Instead, they're asking for 54. And as they mentioned, the chapel, the height of the steeple is going to be 64, now changed to 59, I think. And that is 150% higher than the zoning height maximum, not to mention the critical corridor maximum. Stakeholders have weighed in on this. They've been very clear. The building placement and height are detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. The Sierra Club is concerned that unless certain modifications are made to the proposal, the expansion will negatively impact the parkway and river ecosystem and will set a concerning precedent for future developments. This is the view from the river. Minneapolis Park said, we cannot support a conditional use permit that would allow heights that are 29 feet, that has slightly changed now with their recent change, beyond the zoning ordinance without a specific stated need. This is the view on the north side. The National Parks has weighed in. Given the height And massing, you need to take a look at the exterior, have it neutral and subdued in appearance. The Friends of the Mississippi, we believe this project should be in keeping with the new state rules. After almost a decade of stakeholder discussions and deliberations, the 35-foot height limit was reinforced for the foreseeable future. Public comments have rendered the planning report's conclusion, therefore the approval of the CUP as unsupportable. Again, here is the visual with the pastoral setting, which of course is the river, and the mass. One of the key things that the National Parks has asked us to consider is, how does this look across the river? Here it is. This is right from Otis and Dayton. This is for over 6 months of the year. This was taken 16 days ago. These pictures were. Imagine buildings now that were massive that are 160 feet closer. The report fails to point out that the new 54-foot building, which is shown in sort of a outline over the existing current aerial view as of a year ago, is approximately 160 feet in front of the school's existing buildings and protrude much closer to the West River Parkway. And they're inside the critical corridor by 350 feet. In writing, it says if there's an overlap between the Minneapolis ordinance, the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, and the Mississippi River critical area, wherever there's a case of overlap between plans or policies, zoning, the policy most protective of the critical areas will prevail. Please deny the conditional use permit for height. Let's talk about parking. The parking that is currently still requiring a variance is the one circled in red. Despite opposition by the National Park Service, Sierra Club, many concerned citizens, the Planning Commission approved this. As you know, to approve a variance, a number of things have to be considered. That includes, does the circumstance, is it unique to the property? So there's some practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance. In addition, it cannot be based on economic considerations. Both of these are not true. Minnehaha alone is responsible for wanting a small school to become much larger. That's an economic consideration for a private school, thus the need for parking. The report calls this replacement parking. It is not. It actually goes into the current area where the tennis courts are. So it's not replacing parking, it's going into where the tennis courts are. That's simply a function of how much the entire parcel is being used, and they have 10.9 acres to work with. There's no indication that the school has exhausted all the possible configurations. This parking variance is a serious breach of standards used to adhere to the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan and to protect the critical corridor. Please deny the parking variance. The last conditional use permit would really be the only one if they had had an environmentally sensitive design. And it's simply a K-12 school in an R1 area. Generally, we don't really have any issues with this, but the evidence used in the analysis for this conditional use permit, again, was lacking. They said there is a school, there will be a school. That does not acknowledge the increased capacity, the new size and scale of the proposed buildings, and the predictable impacts on parking and traffic. The argument that in 2001, there was a, let's see if I have the right slide up here. That in 2001, the addition is not an argument, it's not sufficient, and nor does it go against the elements required. We don't even know if the 2001 additions, although I was here at the time, were in compliance with Executive Order 7919 or notification of the DNR was happening. What we do know is all of which will directly affect the safety, comfort, and general welfare of the neighborhood. In addition, the staff kept using words like rebuild, existing, and replacement. These words do not adequately describe the project. This is a replacement and a significant expansion. They're increasing the number of high school students by 54%. Ultimately, with Plan 2, which is alive and well, Phase 2, they're going to double the size. It is detrimental to our comfort and general welfare to build 2 tall buildings in the visually and environmentally sensitive area of the critical corridor. The general placement and height violate these protections and are detrimental to the general welfare. In addition, in the staff report, they talked about the travel plan, which is the TDMP or a traffic management plan. Minnehaha acknowledged it was flawed. For any traffic management plan, they stand on the corner that have been pre-designated. They count the cars. During the time they did that, Minnehaha students were not there. They were in Mendota Heights, and Minneapolis public schools were on spring break. So it can't be valid. In addition, you would think that if they did a plan, they would look at what they did in 2001. In 2001, the same intersections were graded an F, and it's not like a school grading, but that is the worst grading possible for a traffic management plan. In addition, Minneapolis Parks is very concerned about the use of West River Parkway for bus transport, which is not allowed. None of their current plan is consistent with the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan. This building is out of context with the surrounding area. The different policies are listed here. This plan fronts the River Road. The parking facility is the most visible when approaching West River Road. But what do we really want with this conditional use permit? It was approved, and it is a K-12 school in an R1. But due to flawed or misunderstood issues related to the survey, back again is the issue with the gate. That needs to be revisited at a minimum. Plus, we did work with them over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 meetings, and I will tell you that we don't really have confidence the accountability is there. So we would like included in the conditions of approval verbiage around appropriate screening, including native and pollinator-friendly plants. I'm assuming they study that in their science classes. Much more rigorous stormwater runoff management. All building glass, not 40 foot of it, which is in the conditional use permit, but all building glass be made bird safe. You do not need to replace the glass to do so. And then honor the lighting requests that are built into the conditional use permit. There are other conditions in there where they have to work with neighbors on the master plan, and they would redo the travel management plan. Those would work well. Please deny the conditional use permit and/or alter it to support accountability and oversight. The arguments you will hear will be there's an urgency to rebuild. We completely agree. The students should be back by fall of 2019. Remember, the design that was proposed is why there are variances in conditional use permits. The delay was self-imposed. The school's been around 100 years. It's actually been around about 106 years, and they should rebuild. We want them to rebuild responsibly. The fact that there was a 2001 conditional use permit that allowed tall buildings, that is true, but that is not a reason to have tall buildings be put on the site again. In addition, the 2001 buildings, if you'll notice on this elevation from the south, naturally step down towards the river, which is required in the Critical Corridor Act. The current buildings that are proposed do not. So allowing the conditional use permit or the variance in the past is no reason to do so again. They will talk about capacity. This was a large school. It's going to be a large school. The capacity will change for the high school by 54%, and it will double the capacity in the near future. The MOU, maybe it was a red herring. We don't really know. The survey failure probably brings us back to the drawing board. And working with the neighbors, they did for 19 days. They had 8 months. We had less than a month and a half since we first got notice of a meeting on April 4th. Your decisions will live beyond you for generations to come. And in support of the Minneapolis Comprehensive City Plan, please deny the CUPs and the variance and overturn the decision of the Planning Commission. On behalf of the Rebuild Responsibly Community Task Force, thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I have two, and is it Dr. Court?
It is.
You mentioned that the Sierra Club had some stipulations. We talked about it a lot at the Planning Commission, and some of that was adopted in. Are there others besides kind of the dark skies? You mentioned the bird safe glass. Are there others that we should be considering here?
Well, the Sierra Club was specifically talking about height, mass, and placement.
Okay.
And that, for the neighborhood, so one of the things about the MOU is we started with the easy stuff, bird safe glass, screening, et cetera. That's easy. Height, mass, and placement are the biggest issues related to the environment.
Okay. Thank you. And then the second one on the parking you mentioned we are granting a variance. They had more parking on their site. They'll be reducing it, but that amount that they'll be reducing it to is still above what we have for our own ordinance. Are you suggesting that they just meet the ordinance itself?
Actually, they have 4 students. They have 269 spots right now. 20 of them can't be used by students, so that doesn't count. So 249. And there's enormous amounts of congestion and parking out into the neighborhood. Many nights a week, not necessarily during the school, but in the evening, you can't even park in front of your house for about a block or 2 past. And we are concerned about it. We don't know if the city council is as concerned as we are as neighbors. It would be nice to see the 249 stay there, but our biggest issue is the variance.
All right. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to the appellant for item number 4, Douglas Brathwaite. Is the appellant or representative here to speak? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Douglas Braithwaite.
Oh, my apologies.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm the landowner, property owner of 3100 47th Avenue South. I am the 3rd generation to own that house since April of 1944. I came to possession of it with the passing of my sister last July, pancreatic cancer. I was not informed until literally April 21st of a gate placement being moved to the northernmost property line of Minnehaha Academy, which is the Northwest Conference building, which Minnehaha Academy owns. This was brought in as on a Roberts Amendment on the 23rd with no discussion. I brought it up that I was concerned about it. I was glad that a council member or commission member had asked, what I'd like to see. I'd like to slow it down, because as it turns out, and it was me meeting with the city planner a few days later the next week to file the appeal, find out what was going on, to point out that street had never been vacated. So here we are today. I had to file an appeal, even though it was kind of agreed that placement of the gate was totally inappropriate. The setback is anywhere from 94 to 110 feet back from the property line. I can show you, don't have the high the house in blue is my house. The gate is currently these dotted lines, which came into effect 2001, I believe it was, with the addition of the new gymnasium, is when the gate was put in place. And the gate is strictly for an emergency vehicle access, which came to fruition on August 2nd. Any movement of the dead-end street to the north is going to adversely affect my property and my driveway. I'm concerned with any changes that prevents access to the Northwest Conference parking lot as it stands. Now, I have not seen anything until this morning. Literally, I've been on the road traveling. I was not contacted by anybody from the applicant's side until 8 o'clock Tuesday evening. I did not see that email until 10:30 at night while I'm traveling, and I'm not going to sit there and text while I'm driving. Number one, obviously, the gate placement of the 23rd is going to be changed, I hope, because that was improper. It was on a public street. That's going to be moved. Whatever discussions, would have been nice to be part of the of the discussion. We've been there for many years, same phone number since April of 1944. There's no reason why, and I'm an alumni of Minnehaha Academy. So I'm greatly concerned with what was brought up by the previous applicant on some issues too, but I'm in a unique position of being one of 2 owners who literally property adjoins Minnehaha Academy property without a street in between. And what I'm concerned with is any changes to the gate placement or possibly coming back and doing a partial vacating of the street means that then my driveway, because it's street level and then it starts going up and it's a large, long driveway, that people are going to think it's an alley like there is on the north side of Lake Street. Real quickly here. So this is the alley that currently comes from Lake Street that dead ends. And then I am one of 4 driveways on 47th Avenue that have access to their garages. Everybody else uses the alley. That's a dead end. If the dead end is moved, any portion, if it closes off, I would like to see that the access to the Northwest Conference building parking lot and the Minnehaha Academy Maintenance Building parking lot building itself remains the same. So that any traffic that's going to come down the street, because it's happened for 42 years, people don't read the signs, they're going to continue coming down, and they're going to have to turn around. And hopefully the city will do some more improvement on signage too. I want to state, as an alumni of Minnehaha Academy, class of 1983, sister 78 who's deceased, and a sister 1967, Minnehaha Academy has been a member of our family and our community. And I've been greatly disappointed with the lack of communication with the neighborhood, with alumni. Man, we haven't heard anything. To have this stuff rushed through so fast and to have a Roberts Rule Amendment passed, it wasn't even on the printed agenda. Hopefully you saw my appeal that I wrote up explaining how this worked, how it is. I feel for the students today and the ones that are here that their high school career has been upended by a tragedy. But Minnehaha Academy could have done this so responsibly. I took for granted as an alumni and a neighbor that they were going to rebuild in the footprint of the original buildings that were destroyed, with a very appropriate memorial garden for Ruth and John. They could have doubled the size of the footprint of the STEM lab building and still had what they wanted with this beautiful thing, which they could start building next week. But it's literally this pushing through so fast, and I get it, man. We need to have these kids back in their building as soon as possible, but we need to do it responsibly. So number one, I'm asking, and I'm hoping, because I haven't heard anything for sure, but I'm assuming that the decision on April 23rd is going to be reversed, because that gate cannot be placed 18 inches from the edge of my driveway. It would require me having to back vehicles down from 31st Street, from down here, in order to back into my driveway. Or if I have a trailer, I'd have to back in from 31st Street. I'd like to see it kept open for the parking access, which relieves some traffic flow on the 32nd Street side for Northwest Conference building. But there's got to be some good communication. Didn't hear from a couple parties until one just a few minutes before the start. And again, another one emailing me, being forwarded. I didn't see it till 10:15 in Kentucky. And I'm not about to sit there and spend more time sitting on the road trying to communicate with somebody. This should have been done back in February or March, even April 1st, or even been asked to be part of the discussion as literally one of two property owners whose property line is adjacent to the school. Everybody else in the neighborhood are adjacent to the school and are across the street. But there's only two of us that actually have right there. And I'm sorry that this happened in such a way, and I urge you to slow this process down. In fact, I agree with the previous applicant or appellate that we should redo this. And it's unfortunate, and it still can go along pretty quick if they come back with a revised plan that actually uses the footprint of the old buildings, of the STEM lab building, that they could even increase to get the numbers they need in the space. They could have a green roof on the STEM lab, which then becomes a biology classroom. It could be done appropriately, and I'm very disappointed with my family. And I don't know if there's any questions. I will say that, just half hour prior to the meeting, I saw something where MA will seek an encroachment permit to allow the gate to be located in the right-of-way that will not interfere with Mr. Braithwaite's use of the driveway. Well, again, I have no idea where they're talking about. Are they talking about closing off the access to Northwest Conference? My proposal is, if they're going to do it, it can go right here. If the trucks are going to have to come in from 32nd Street, they pull in, back in. But if they block this driveway going into Northwest Conference or the maintenance building, which is located here, the archive house is over here. But anything that's blocked here because of the size of my driveway, location of my driveway, and city Minneapolis having a lot of alleys that are teed in neighborhoods, I'm going to have a lot of traffic pulling in my driveway. If not my driveway, then it's also going to be the one directly to the north with the 1.5 and 4-year-old little boy, and I'm concerned for their safety. As I explained in my appeal statement, just that week following, monitoring the traffic because West River Road was closed for resurfacing underneath, the amount of traffic was incredible. And people get ticked off and they're speeding and they're flying down and turning around on my driveway. It's a fact. That happens. But any movement of the dead end farther north is going to really adversely affect my property and the ones next to mine. Snow removal is a huge deal. 42 years ago, this was a dead end street that was created for the use of athletic fields, not parking. Here we are today, more parking. This could be done appropriate. The emergency gate did not come into play until 2001. The emergency access was along the buildings from 31st Street. They just drove on the big sidewalk. The gate didn't come into play until they added the gymnasium. So there's been changes. Changes are going to happen. I want to see the school continue. Again, as I said before, it's been a gem in our neighborhood, but the gem is getting tarnished right now because of communication, and it's the fruition of a handful of people on the applicant side that just did not communicate with people. And again, I took for granted as an alumni and as a neighbor that they're going to rebuild responsibly and use the footprint. Like I said, any change to the driveway, it's not just, the convenience of my driveway, but it's a safety issue of a lot of traffic is going to change. I don't, if there's any questions I was prepared to try to say more, but I'm tired. I've been out of town. I'm trying to deal with my sister's estate. This situation alone has cost me thousands of dollars in lost revenue. I had to pay $450 to file an appeal that I don't think I really should have had to pay on something that was done that I had a phone call from the president of the school Monday on my cell phone and on my answering machine. It's actually still on my recorder on my answering machine in Wilmer, saying that, because I called on Friday, April 21st, when I first heard of this. It wasn't until April 21st that I heard about the gate being moved someplace from being moved. And the president of the school said, well, we're in discussions with the neighborhood group. This isn't anything that, worry about. It won't be brought up today. Well, it was.
Yep.
And here we are.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions from any of my colleagues? Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now that we've heard from the appellants, I'd also like to give the applicant the opportunity to address the community regarding these two appeals. Is there a representative here to speak? And if you can state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Donna Harris. I'm the president of Minnehaha Academy. Thanks for the opportunity to the members of the committee to just respond to the appeal. And I'm here just to say one thing, and that is to make an apology. This is an opportunity again to apologize to the members of the committee as well as our neighbors in terms of our lack of engagement with the neighbors early on. I think that we were, as a community, focused on the aftermath of the explosion. It was a tragedy that we did not anticipate and never want to walk through again. In our 105-year history, this is unprecedented. And so we were focusing on the aftermath of lost lives, injuries. We were helping our teachers who lost all of their instructional material as we were trying to navigate getting into a temporary site. And so we did not give the attention, I believe, early on to our neighbors. I would add, though, that in the early months after the explosion, our board did its due diligence in really evaluating, after 105 years of being in a location, as to whether we would stay in that location. And so that took a number of months. So we weren't planning a rebuild at 3100 initially. We were looking at the various options that the school might review. And so that took a number of months. And then I would like to respond, because I've heard it several times, that we had about 35 design meetings. And I just want to offer clarification. After the explosion, we gathered our school community together to really talk about how do we rebuild. And if you think about a pre-K-12 school with many departments, math, science, reading, language, we had many meetings with those departments of teachers to learn from them as we rebuilt. What would they need to deliver a high quality educational experience? And so you can imagine meeting with the fine arts department 3 times, or meeting with the math department 3 times. And when you meet, have those number of meetings, it does add up to about 30 or so meetings. These were not design meetings with architects. They were design in terms of meeting with architects around building. It was around programming. What does a math teacher need? What was inefficient about the building that you were using that we could address in the new building? You know, how do we integrate what we know about solid teaching and learning? What does the research tell us? And so those were those meetings. So just wanted to offer that clarification. I'm not here to make excuses. We could have, those internal meetings were probably too internal. We probably should have reached out to our neighbors earlier. It wasn't our intention to not address in conversations and have conversations with our neighbors. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to again offer another public apology. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Harris. I'm Mike Berg. I'm with Cunningham Group Architecture. We're representing the design team, working with Minnehaha Academy. And I just need to get my plug in here. Oh, just the bottom one? Just the top one. All right, thank you. So I'm just here to talk through some of the design aspects of the project. And I think Shanna, thanks again for the presentation. Did a really nice job of kind of summarizing a lot of things that have happened over the course of time. And so I'll just kind of go through this presentation, talk a little bit about the things that were changed leading up to the initial conditional use permit application, then things that happened subsequent to that through conversations with the neighbors, neighborhood groups, task force, and city staff. So the context, I think the site plan has been pretty well established and understood. This slide is just reiterating the locations of the buildings that were lost and the location of the new addition, showing that it's staying outside of the general tree zone of the parkway, but it agreeably addressing the river in a different way than the original building did. The Minnehaha Academy has felt for a long time, obviously they've been on this property for over 100 years, that the river is a great asset, and the landscape and the nature is a great asset. And so this project is a re-envisioning of their school to bring some of those components more into the curriculum of the school. So some facts about the North Campus. So the square footage that was lost as a result of the explosion was about 55,000 square feet. About half of that was demolished in the explosion. The rest of that square footage was irreparable as a result, and the structure was not viable. And so that building was removed, leaving the athletics building and the chapel building. The new proposed square footage is 72,000 square feet. Should be noted that there's the existing buildings that remained are about 105,000 square feet combined. So the the overall square footage of the building is more than just the 72,000 square feet that was there. Those existing buildings contribute also. The enrollment, there's been some discussion about enrollment. The peak enrollment back in 1981 was 810 students. That's all on this North Campus. The current enrollment, at least prior to the explosion event, was 350. And the planned enrollment of 540 is trying to bring them back to an enrollment that they feel Minnehaha feels is viable for the ongoing school existence. Setbacks have been discussed quite a lot, and relationships to river and parkway. This slide is just illustrating some of the dimensions to the property line, to the parkway, and then to the river. The 410-foot dimension to Mississippi River is a good number to have in our head. My understanding is that the Mississippi critical area, there's a 300-foot dimension that. And Carol will be talking a little bit about some of the more technical aspects of overlay and neighborhood and ordinance after I finish this presentation. But again, the dimension of the Mississippi River, 410 feet. The dimension to the parkway is 167 feet, and the next door neighbor, the Danish American Center, is 95'6". So some of the changes that have happened to the site plan since initial application and even before. So the building location was adjusted to reduce the need for variances in the parking on the east side of the property. The building was moved to the north to allow the parking to breathe a little bit more on 32nd Avenue and to allow for a landscape buffer that would provide good visual screening from the neighbors and from the street. The steeple height has been reduced a couple of times. Originally it was 68 feet, it was reduced to 64. And then at the last Planning Commission meeting, it was reduced to 59 foot 6 inches, which is its current height. Exterior materials, Shanna talked about that just a little bit. The original materials that we were cladding the building with, if you remember the renderings, and I think we'll come to some in a little bit, was a fiber cement cladding system. There was lots of discussion with neighbors and alumni as well, and even within our own design team about appropriateness of materials. And so we've been studying that quite a lot. The decision has recently been made to change from that fiber cement panel to a brick system. And so it will be much more in keeping with buildings in the neighborhood, both residential and commercial buildings that are in the general area. The increased parking has also been discussed. Obviously, we're trying to strike a balance between handling all of the parking requirements of the property, the city ordinances that limit the parking, and then finding that balance that allows the maximum usage of the site without impeding too much in the neighborhood. So the numbers will come up in a future slide. But suffice to say that we've added parking since conversations with the neighborhood requesting that addition, primarily on the student side. You can see on the west side of the property there is a lot labeled student parking, and the decision was made at a recent meeting that west side would be dedicated to students, and the parking on the right side would be staff and visitors. The landscape buffers I talked about a little bit, and talked about pollinators and native plants and things like that. And so that landscape will be developed with the neighborhood and with community members so that we can make sure that we have appropriate landscaping, providing appropriate screening for the property.
Hold one. We have one question from Councilmember Gordon.
Yes.
I just wanted to know, what's the current height of the steeple, the existing steeple before the new plans came in?
At the previous meeting, there was discussions of lowering it to 59'6".
Well, I mean, what was it before the explosion?
Oh, the current existing steeple?
Yes.
59'6".
59'6"?
Yeah. So we reduced it at the last Planning Commission meeting or just prior to it. And I don't think it showed up in the graphic or in some of the notes from that meeting because it was a discussion point that we wanted to not exceed what was there currently.
Yeah, I don't think it got added as a condition necessarily, but so it's going to be the same height as the one that was.
Yeah, the agreement has been to reduce it again to meet the height of the existing steeple. Thanks for that clarification. Also, of course, lots of discussion about bird safe issues and environment and trees. There were 5 mature trees, oak and elm, I think 4 oak and 1 elm, on the property that had been previously slated for removal. And at the encouragement of some of the conversation with neighbors and other advocates, we're saving 5 additional mature trees in the courtyard and on the west side of the property. And the gate location, Mr. Braithwaite did a nice. So the additional trees that are being saved are near the parking lot that's labeled student parking up there, and then in the space between the 2 existing buildings. No trees are being removed on the east side of the property. Thanks. The gate location, obviously, with current property lines and regulations, that gate is going to have to be on Minnehaha property. So currently, we're showing it in this location. We'd welcome discussion, as was mentioned in the staff report, about an encroachment permit, if that would be appropriate and agreeable to all involved, just to make sure that everybody has proper access to their properties, both Minnehaha and neighbors. And then the parking designation, I mentioned briefly that the parking has been delineated now so that staff is parking on the east side of the property and students are parking on the west side. So we just wanted to just briefly go through the floor plans so that people could understand the contents of the building. There's been a lot of conversation about site and parking and trees and those sorts of things, but just understanding how the building works a little bit sometimes helps people make decisions as well. So this is the first floor of the building, the main entry facing south and east towards that east parking lot. So this is rotated 90 degrees from the slide that we had up previously. And on the first floor, there's a science learning community that has all of those core science classrooms. And then there's, all of the pieces that you would expect to see in a high school. We have a commons and a lunchroom. We have a library. We have a campus room for events, for board and staff and students and guests. And then we have kitchen support functions that you need to support all of those parts of the facility. On the upper levels, the 2 learning communities are essentially 5 classrooms per learning community. Those classrooms face the river and are supported by toilet functions and core functions and some kind of incidental community spaces that can be used as breakout classroom spaces and things like that. So again, all of the things that you would expect to see in a high school. A green roof was mentioned in one of the earlier discussions, and there is an intent that we would have an occupiable green roof that would again bring all of the elements that a green roof does in terms of treatment of water and the great visual and environmental aspects, and also allow the school more outdoor teaching spaces, like Mr. Braithwaite had suggested in his point. So the relationship to the river. This slide is really to document. I had shown the previous slide that focused in on the property itself, Minnehaha's property. This expands to the entire neighborhood and shows that 410-foot relationship to the river and extrapolates it across the neighborhood. And you can see that there are many buildings that are within that dimension, including all of those on Edmond and then further up on the other side of Lake Street. So as far as the relationship to the river, we just wanted to make sure that it was understood, the relative position of the building. So this is a sectional slide, so I'm hoping everybody can read this well enough. So that the height of the building has been a big discussion point. The building height that's in the application and the CUP is 53'8". And it should be noted that that's not the entire height of the building. That is one small piece of the learning community. The rest of the learning community is lower than that at a height of about 46 feet. And then the green roof is down at a height of 18 feet. So the building actually does step down as it approaches the river. But the maximum height of that piece of the building is 53'8". And then of course the tower, 59'6" that we mentioned previously. Just also wanted to point out the relationship of the buildings that were lost and the building that's being proposed. You can see that red dashed line shows the original buildings were 46 foot 9.5 inches. So although the height of the building is technically 53'8", because that building sat much higher on the property, the relative height is actually lower than those buildings were. So I mentioned the tree counts. This slide is, I guess, just to illustrate the trees that we have acknowledged that we're going to try to save. The two orange ones that are in the space between the gray buildings, the existing buildings, and then some additional that are along the parking on the west side. But the tree count, the staff report talks about the number of trees that are required, and we're exceeding that by many trees in terms of the trees gained. You can see on the graph on the left side of the document, we're adding 173 trees to the property. So again, presence to the river gorge, from Lake Street, from across the river. Just wanted to show some slides that demonstrated that. I think the language that I heard earlier was that the predominant visual feature should be trees and bluffs. And these are pictures that were provided by the park board. And they clearly show that the predominant visual feature is trees and bluffs. The school's not visible in these. And I think that there are certain angles that you can take a picture from where you can see the school. But again, predominantly, this is illustrating, and you can see the points on the site plan on the right where those are taken from. The predominant view is trees and bluffs. So again, just to be fair, took a picture during, this was about a month ago, I guess, before the leaves had all come out and warmed up. And this is just to illustrate the position of the building, the height of the building as currently designed, and how it is, again, predominantly trees, even without greenery. So we have some additional images that we've put together that shows the views from West River Parkway. This is a current image without the new addition shown. And then you can see, if I toggle back and forth, you can see the new brick colored massing that's in the trees. Clearly visible, clearly not the predominant feature. And then we just have a couple of other images as we work our way down the street. This one's from a little bit further south, and you know, as these small trees grow up and become larger trees, that impact will even be lessened. And then this is from the corner near Edmond and 32nd, and you can see the existing school building, the existing 59'6" steeple element, and then as we put this on top of it, you can see the new building, parking lot with the screening that had been discussed and agreed to in previous sessions. So just talking a little bit about the environmental benefits and landscape design. We are working with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization to talk about stormwater management and looking at possible grants with them for other environmental opportunities like solar, like the green roof that's been currently proposed. And then we talked about plant species a little bit before. We're talking about native and pollinator plantings and those elements that had been previously discussed. We've added more than 170 trees to the site, as I mentioned before. And then as far as the bird safe glass, we actually met with Joanne Eccles. She's a conservation biologist. She actually wrote the Minneapolis Skyway provision, and I think is a real friend to that community. And everybody who's concerned about those issues. And so we had a great session with her, and we plan to have more to talk about ways that we can implement bird safe glass and other treatments that will prevent any kind of bird deaths to the migratory flyway. And then lastly, you know, talking about sizes of windows and amounts of windows and heights of buildings. You know, there's been discussion about why can't you bury the building or other things like that would possibly reduce the daylight, and we're trying to follow LEED standards and best practices for educational design as much as possible. And one of those standards that's key for both learning and health and welfare of children and all building occupants is the idea of daylight and views. And so that's a LEED point that we're going to adhere to and really make the building as healthy as possible. So I mentioned the exterior materials previously. This is an image that I think a lot of people have seen. It's showing the fiber cement cladding system on the upper stories of the building, and then you know the windows and louvered sunshades that we've had in the building for some time.
Excuse me, this is not a question and answer period. No, you're fine. Although this, if you wouldn't mind just speeding it up a little bit.
Oh, sorry, I'll rush it. Yeah. So this is a rendering showing the new brick cladding material The idea, again, is to have the building blend more with architecture in the neighborhood and the historical context.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from council members? And Miss, you, during the public comment period, if you have a question, you can come up. So, thank you. And if
Good.
you,
I will be brief.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Good afternoon, Carol Lansing, Faegre Baker Daniels. What I wanted to address was how the revisions and conditions, as you noted, Councilmember Schrader, that were made in comments from the environmental groups attached to Ms. Cody's appeal have been responded to. The National Park Service recommended reducing the height of the steeple, and it's been to the height of the existing, and it's been reduced. They did not object to the height of the buildings, but they did suggest using more natural colors and subdued materials, and we believe that the brick that you're seeing today does that. They recommended adding some trees, and we will certainly work with the park board or anyone to assist in that effort. The Sierra Club also recommended reducing the height of the steeple, again did not object to the height of the buildings. They were objected to the location of the parking lot on the east side bordering the parkway. We no longer need a setback variance. We are 25 feet from the parkway, and landscape berming is being added. They were pleased with the condition regarding bird-safe glass incorporation, and they urged best management practices for runoff, which is again a condition, and we are working with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. The park board, steeple height, landscape screening the parking lot, those are being addressed. The bus circulation, we've reached out to them. Now, the Friends of the Mississippi River, and this is the last area I wanted to touch on, suggested using the 2016 rules for the Mississippi Critical Corridor area. Those are going to be phased in over 5 years. The existing rules are incorporated in the city's Mississippi River Overlay District, and those restrict height within 300 feet of the river or 100 feet of the top of a bluff. They do, and the school additions are not within those areas, so they are not applicable to the school location. And the 2016 rules of the DNR say that until new rules are adopted, new ordinances are adopted and approved by the state, the city is to implement its existing rules. That's what they're doing. To deny a CUP because it may need to be a variance 4 years in the future is not legally supportable and is inconsistent with the state's own recommendation. So I did indicate in our letter that we understand that the gate addition gate location condition needs to be addressed, and we can put it back, or keep it where it is, and we would like your approval of the proposed brick. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
I just wonder if we could have a moment to hear from our own city attorney about the Mississippi Critical Corridor area and what we're supposed to be basing our decision on. We've heard about it from both groups. We know it's really an important and key thing. So give us some clarity. I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I'd be happy to do so. Ms. Lansing is correct. The DNR engaged in a lengthy, long rulemaking process, which concluded at the very end of 2016. I believe the new rules were published December 27th, 2016. The rules themselves address how local governments are going to consider those changes. We will have to bring our existing critical area plan and regulations into compliance, but the rules do contemplate and acknowledge that it's a lengthy process. They generally align that obligation of the local governments to coincide with the required 10-year update of the comprehensive plan, which we're doing now. So the city will be theoretically or conceivably updating its critical area plan that is part of a component of the comprehensive plan. And then we will also have to update our regulations. And in order to have regulations that are effective, the rules do indicate that there's heavy scrutiny and lengthy scrutinized periods by the Metropolitan Council and the DNR before they are effective. So during this interim period, before that occurs, our existing plan and our existing regulations are the only plan and regulations that have legal force and effect for purposes of review of the development. And Ms. Lansing and I think Shanna mentioned as well that the location here does not implicate, in terms of the height, the critical area overlay. The request for height is requests to increase height via CUP in the residential zoning district. So.
Thank you. There are no more questions from my colleagues. I'd like to open the hearing to the public. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked by the timer with the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council President Bender, and other members of the Zoning and Planning Committee. I want to make 4 points. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Sharon Sells Belton, and I live at 3332 Edmond Boulevard, a block and a half from Minnehaha Academy, and I've lived there for about 22 years. So I have some experience with the school. First, I want to just say that the Mississippi River Corridor is protected land. I appreciate the comments by the city attorney. Of the Minnehaha Academy proposes to rebuild the school at heights that, in our opinion, are inconsistent with the guidelines that are in that corridor plan. There is a reasonable alternative. You can simply grant the appeal that the appellant has presented, or you can require that Minnehaha Academy set back the buildings consistent with the MCCA and address the flawed traffic management plan that was referenced by city staff and by the appellant. My request is that the committee and the city council affirm their commitment to protect the Mississippi River Corridor and affirm their stewardship of public lands within the city limits. By Minnehaha Academy's own admission, they did fail to fully engage the neighbors due to their own pressures, and we understand and respect that. And they have not been, however, amenable to addressing the most critical issues that we as neighbors have presented in front of them. And some of those concerns have been expressed by organizations that you've heard referenced today. We simply ask that the city council really take seriously our request to ask Minnehaha Academy to build responsibly. They are our neighbors, and we're prepared to continue to live with them for another 100 years. But we want to do so in a way that affirms our livability as neighbors in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there anyone else interested in speaking? Oh, sure. Why don't you get in queue next? We're not really. If you can go, and then we'll have.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Danielle Robinson. I am a sophomore at Minnehaha Academy. I first came into Minnehaha as a freshman, which was last year. I was so excited to come to this school because of the plethora of opportunities. And that's just one thing I love about MA. It keeps me busy, and I enjoy every moment of it. One of the other reasons I loved MA is because of the building and the location. Just down the street, there's a Dunn Brothers Longfellow Grill and a Dairy Queen that my friends and I always walk to after school every day. I made so many fun memories there. Having the building rebuilt will bring back these memories. By my senior year, I will hopefully be attending the new campus. I want my senior year to be a memorable one, and returning to the place where I started my first year of high school is definitely something I won't forget. Please show your support for us by supporting our new expansion. You are looking at the state's future, and I promise you won't regret it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Schroeder and members of the committee. My name is Irene Jones. I am the River Corridor Program Director with Friends of the Mississippi River. I just would like to, for the record, correct the fact that I did not suggest that the council should follow the new rules in making a decision. I suggested that it demonstrated that after all this time, even with all the growth the city is trying to do, the community at large still wants the height to be 35 feet at this location. So that's why I brought that up. But I do want to point out that the current existing critical area plan for the city of Minneapolis is in force. It does have a lot of policy language in here that I think that these conditional use permits do not meet. I think it's important. It's one of the findings that the conditional use permit has to meet the city's comprehensive plan. My understanding is that the critical area plan is incorporated by reference into the comprehensive plan. And so the policies that are listed, and they're all in the staff report, but they're not actually used to make the arguments about the findings. They're just kind of listed. There are a lot of policies about buildings need to step down, that buildings need to not be that visible from the river itself, that they need to be compatible with the surroundings of the park. And so I would encourage you to look carefully at those policies. Your ordinance is weak compared to your plan, and that is not the fault of anyone here. That happened as a result of GNR staff that approved an ordinance that probably shouldn't have been approved. In my opinion, your critical area ordinance is not consistent with your plan, and you should be looking at your plan for your policy about how you treat these areas. And I appreciate Minnehaha Academy and appreciate all the children that are here, and I have a feeling that most of these children would not notice if each floor was 14 feet high instead of 17 feet high. I think they would still be able to go to Dairy Queen and experience their school and learn, and that would not make a difference to them. So I think it would be really helpful if the height could be lowered on this project to make a good compromise. Also, this was passed out to give you some idea of how special the gorge is and how many people have been involved in helping to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if you can say your name for the record. You can also move the mic down.
My name is Solomon Obert, and I am a 6th grader from Minnehaha Academy. And being the youngest of 2 siblings that have previously gone to the middle school and now are at the upper school, one of which is a senior, I felt very connected to the upper school because I was constantly there for events, and I also happened to live right across the river. And every day while we were driving down to the upper school to do something, I would always look across the river and see and know that one day I might be able to go to that school. But after the explosion, everything just happened so fast. And so I just hope that the building plans can go through fast, and every day that this is delayed due to parking or anything else is another day that could have been used to build a school that will then create memories.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Savannah Schweitzer, and I'm also a 6th grader at MA. I came to Minnehaha in 2nd grade, and I didn't know how to read, but then now I'm catched up with all my peers, and I can do anything they can do. And I'm excited for the new middle school and high school to be built, that everyone can get their well-deserved education just like I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Good afternoon, Mitch Thompson. I live at 3405 46th Avenue South. I wanted to emphasize one point that I think was missed in the conversation, is that when we talk about the community and the neighborhood, that very much includes Minnehaha parents and students. When I heard the discourse today, there was a lot of they and them, or even the community has spoken. And to say that I don't think that's really representative of the folks that I know that live and work in the neighborhood expressly for being near the school. I live and work in Minneapolis. I was able to use my lunch break to come over here and speak today. And I wanted to emphasize that when we talk about the community and the neighborhood, it includes Minnehaha parents and students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Ty Thomas. I live at 3300 46th Avenue South, just a block away from the school. I do have 3 kids that attend the school currently. I do work in the area, have a small business run out of my home. Just wanted to give you guys some perspective on my insight. So the school, so I moved to the area for the school. I used to live in Woodbury. I drove through the community every single day until I saw for sale sign pop up at the house that I was looking at. I made the offer on the house before I even looked on the inside, just purely on location. So that's how important that location is to me. My kids when we started, would walk to school every day. My second grader that's here now would walk with his older brothers, and he had a great connection with the upper school as well. Now, just to give you perspective on how displaced we are, my older kids play sports, so they're not able to escort their younger brother to and from home every day. Now we have to leave work early. We have to drive. Me being a person, I don't see any conflicts with the traffic. We drove through the traffic every day. The kids walked to and from. I didn't see that much traffic. If it was for a 15-minute period, and then the traffic would be gone. Nothing excessive for any school in the area. Then secondly, as far as the heights, I think they're doing a great job being innovative and supporting the education of the kids. The kids may not know all the intricacies that go into the design of the building, but I think the school has done tremendous amounts of research, educating the parents on what that design would look like and how it can further educate kids in the future as we stay in this community for another 100 years. So I want to further state that we hope that the plans go through. We want to start to see the construction every day that I drive down my street. I want to see steps one brick at a time as we move forward for the future. Thank you.
Hi, Mike Stallo, 3230 Edmond Boulevard. Michelle addressed some of the issues around the variance for the location of the parking lot, and I want to just delve into that a little, excuse me, a little bit more. Again, make it clear, I think the neighborhood in general is very supportive of having as many parking spots on site as possible. Nonetheless, I don't think that Minnehaha Academy has made a valid case for the variance. My understanding is that there are 3 critical findings that must be met in order for a variance to be granted. And let me just review those quickly. The first one is that practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. The unique circumstances were not created by persons presently having an interest in the property and are not based on economic considerations alone. Meeting this test here stresses any bounds of reasonableness. Granting this finding would set a bad precedent. There's no indication that the school exhausted all of its opportunities to explore other parking configurations. There are 2 additional parking lots that they are proposing. Either of those could be expanded. Moreover, the purported need to put the parking in between the school and West River Road is entirely the school's decision. They have decided to reconfigure the entire campus, so they could easily, I shouldn't say easily, they could put that parking lot elsewhere. They are deciding to put an open courtyard in the rear of the building. They are not going to interfere with their athletic field. The second finding is the property owner or authorized applicant proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner that will be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. Clearly that's not the case. Policy 10.18.3 of the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan instructs applicants to locate the parking to the sides or rear of the building. The third and final finding is that the proposed variance will not alter the essential character of the locality or be injurious to the use or enjoyment of other property in the vicinity. With respect to this parking lot, they're changing a tennis court into a parking lot that clearly is altering the character of that part of this parcel.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Joe Huber. I'm here to support one of the longest residents of this community, which is Minnehaha Academy. They've been through an awful tragedy, and I applaud their community, especially their principal, in handling the logistics of moving a school, supporting their students and teachers through the emotional trauma that this tragedy was, and also finding a pathway forward, which has been arduous and difficult, and they're only human. And I get that people feel skirted because they didn't have enough community outreach sessions. But I really reject this premise that the Minnehaha Academy is trying to get around the neighborhood. They're strong stewards of the community, and I think it's only fair that we support them in their future endeavors. And honestly, I'm kind of embarrassed that all of these students have to leave school and come here to support their new building. It's probably a good lesson in the nuances and ridiculousness that is local land use politics. But there have been multiple buildings approved along the Riverview corridor that probably aren't in compliance or were grandfathered in. And here we are debating for 2 hours over parking and the height of the steeple. And it just seems like a bad look to oppose the rebuilding plans of the longest tenant of the community and a community that's so strong and have thoughtfully thought about staying in the neighborhood rather than moving somewhere else, which the principal alluded to, would be very easy for them to do. So I ask you to just stand with Minnehaha Academy and support their proposal to remain in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Sarah Christensen. I live at 3349 47th Avenue South. I'm here in support of Minnehaha's plan. My father, my Aunt Lois, my Aunt Corinne, and my younger sister Becky are all graduates of Minnehaha Academy. My father and aunts, I think, boarded with people in the neighborhood when they went to the school. My husband is a teacher at Minnehaha Academy. He's been teaching there for 18 years. And our 4 children are students at Minnehaha, and 2 of which are currently going to high school in Office Park for Minnehaha. We're also members of Bethlehem Covenant Church, which got its beginnings from Minnehaha Academy when a janitor started a Sunday school on the porch of the school, and it's now grown into a thriving church in the neighborhood. I've lived 2 blocks from the North Campus for almost 22 years and live in the neighborhood because of Minnehaha, and we stay because of Minnehaha and also because of the neighbors that we love. We love the beauty of the neighborhood. We appreciate the Mississippi River Basin and feel lucky to be living close to it. While the time has been short for discussions with the community, Minnehaha has been listening to the neighbors, and they've made adjustments to the original design, including adding parking, moving the east parking lot north to allow for a landscape buffer, minimizing the tree loss and planning for additional trees, adding a landscape buffer on the east side of the parking lot to minimize visibility from the West River Parkway, adding design elements to minimize risk to birds, providing on-site storm water management, reducing the steeple height, and incorporating building materials that blend in with the natural surroundings. The most current design has addressed the concerns that have been raised related to parking, bird safety, tree loss, visibility of the parking lot from 32nd Street and West River Parkway, stormwater runoff, and views from various locations across the river. I ask you to support the decision of the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and council members, my name is Dan McConnell. I currently reside at 3317 47th Avenue South, which is less than 2 blocks south of the proposed project. I also have served as the business manager of the Minneapolis Building Trades Council, where I advocate on behalf of the 25 affiliated local unions and 14,000 construction workers. Most importantly, I'm the parent of a 2nd grader who attends Minnehaha Academy. I'm here to speak in favor of the proposed project. Minnehaha Academy has been part of the community where I grew up since the original building opened in 1913. And by coincidence, my great-grandparents moved into Longfellow at that same fall. My family has lived alongside MA in the Longfellow neighborhood continuously for the last 105 years, and I can say without hesitation that they've been an asset to our community and a good neighbor. Anytime you design a building, the owners are going to be faced with multiple choices about the design. The end result is always going to be a compromise between competing needs. If we're going to build this school in a vacant lot in the middle of a field with no zoning requirements or no neighbors, the design would be much different. The staff and board members of Minnehaha Academy are not experts in building schools. Their skill set is to educate the students within them, and as they've worked through the approval process, they've made mistakes. No one is arguing that they shouldn't have done a better job working with the broader community. They sent out the required notices. They did what they thought they needed to do. As the plans became public and they started hearing concerns of the neighbors, they quickly realized they needed to work more closely with the community on their plans. They've done so with a true desire to do better. As they've worked with the neighbors, they've made additional compromises on the design. They've decreased the height of the building, the scale, they changed the orientation to preserve trees. They've increased landscaping screens, invested in a traffic study, and hit the pause button on their phase 2. To say they are not listening to the community is not true. Unfortunately, despite their efforts over the last several weeks, I've seen an enormous amount of misinformation about this project being spread in our neighborhood, primarily through social media. Some of the posts I've seen are so over the top. It seems that folks on both sides of this issue have lost their ability to be objective.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm all, one more thing.
No.
Oh, I'm done. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Alicia Belton, and I live at 2419 East Lake of the House Parkway. I have 2 children who attend Minnehaha Academy. They both started at school when they were 3-year-olds as preschoolers and are currently in the 2nd and 5th grades. I'm here today to express my overwhelming support for our school's plans to rebuild the North Campus for 21st century learners. Despite our challenges, we have an incredible opportunity to rethink the path on how we prepare and engage our students for academic excellence, leadership, and service. One of the values of Minnehaha Academy that I so appreciate is our commitment to being a caring community. This is clearly evident in how faculty and staff, students and teachers, and our parent community care for and respect each other's perspectives. Together, we have risen to conduct the business of the school while managing the personal and physical impact of the explosion and the planning of this new facility, which has been no small undertaking. The same caring community extends beyond the walls to our neighbors. We have been for more than 100 years and will continue to be good neighbors. As a parent, I could not ask for a more supportive and nurturing environment for my children, one that is filled with grace, integrity, and a commitment to do what is right. I also view our project to rebuild North Campus through the other hat I wear today as an architect. Our plans reflect an environmental stewardship where we are respecting the guidelines for developments in proximity to the Mississippi River, demonstrating attention to the migratory bird safety, and reducing the amount of hardscape surfaces. We understand and acknowledge the importance of our location as our 7th grade students do a research project on the Mississippi River each year. The new building is designed with best practices for learning environments, incorporating energy efficiencies and sustainable features like the proposed solar and green roof. Furthermore, it is appropriately scaled and, in fact, shorter than the previous buildings and sited for the context of the surrounding neighborhood, providing an aesthetic quality that reflects our past and inspires our future. Having a school located in an urban neighborhood, there will always be concerns with traffic and parking. So I urge you to support our project. We really want to be back to have our staff in one location, to have the ability to host sporting events, and to celebrate all of our school coming back together again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I was kind of hoping I'd be able to say good morning, but
us too.
My name is Eric Ramses. I live at 3200 Edmond Boulevard, very near the school. Wanted to make a quick comment, and hopefully it will be quick. One of the elements or one of the findings of conditional use permits is that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I appreciated Ms. Lansing's and the city attorney's opinion, but one of the elements is referring you to the comprehensive plan. And section 692 of the comprehensive plan kicks you to, it says we're going to continue to implement the Mississippi River Critical Area Plan. So that's part of the documents that are before you guys today. And if you look at the lower gorge, especially this part of the area of the critical corridor, I'm going to back envelope an equation, but 75 to 80% of it is residential. And a 35-foot request to exceed 35 feet is never going to come into play with the residential, with most residential homes. If you're not going to apply it to this situation, what was the vote that approved the Minneapolis Critical Area Plan on June 16th, 2006? What was that vote for? This is your opportunity to honor that council's decision, and we request you to do so. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Guerra. I live 4 houses north of Minnehaha Academy at 3027 47th Ave. I've been part of the task force. The plan that I saw from Minnehaha on May 10th was a little bit disappointing. It showed no effort to mitigate known and acknowledged negative impacts of truck safety, traffic, and loading. These impacts had been identified by neighbors, recognized by Minnehaha, and were required to be addressed by the Planning Commission as a condition of approval. The proposal that I saw today from Minnehaha also still leaves unaddressed impacts from loading and truck traffic. Neighbors on 47th and 48th believe Minnehaha can and should keep trucks entering the site from 32nd Street and keep truck movements internal to the site as was done on the prior site plan. This can be practically accommodated with minor site plan changes that would reorient access to the loading area from the south and an area shown in an area shown in prior plans as snow loading area. In addition, neither the new access point off of a public street nor the truck loading movement minimize conflict with surrounding residential uses as required by city code. Reorienting the loading access to an internal access point would mitigate impacts on nearby residences and keep maneuvers off-street as further suggested by code. As you review the appeal and response, I ask that you respect neighbors' concerns, the Planning Commission's stated intent to restrict truck access on 47th, and enforce city code by minimizing conflict with residential uses, both from vehicular access and circulation, by maintaining a singular access point off of 32nd Street, keeping truck movements internal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Johnson, and I reside at 3234 44th Avenue South. I have 2 children at the lower campus of Minnehaha, and more importantly, I am in the Cooper neighborhood, and this is my neighborhood. I'm not as prepared as many other people have been, but I do want to say that I'm deeply disturbed by many of the misrepresentation of facts and the entitlement that I feel that some of my neighbors have. There's a larger population that has not been vocal in support of the rebuild of the campus, because Minnehaha is important to our neighborhood. We do support, as neighbors, the local communities, the local shops, the local everything around the area. We also appreciate the river as neighbors and as a community. I know some of the parking issues have been a major issue for a lot of people. I live across from Cooper School. When we moved into that neighborhood, Cooper was closed. We live by Bethlehem Covenant Church, which was referenced. People go to church there and they park near our streets for events. There's many different things across the street at the park with soccer. People park there. The beauty of our neighborhood is it is utilized. We want our streets to be used. We want the parks to be used. We also have the ability to have our own off-street parking. So if I come home and I see events at the street, across the street at the soccer field, I have the ability to use my off-street parking, which I know the majority of the people in our neighborhood and those surrounding the upper campus also have that ability. So I'm asking you to support the rebuild and the expansion. And unfortunately, the children did have to leave, but they want to be back there too. We want to be one cohesive community again, not just for the school, but for our neighborhood. I feel very disjointed as a neighbor at this point. I would like to regain some cohesiveness in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Winston Cabot. I'm a medical school faculty member at the university. I now live a little bit north of Minnehaha Academy on the other side of Lake Street, but I grew up a block and a half south where my parents, south of the upper campus, where my parents lived for more than 5 decades. When I was a student at Minnehaha in the 1970s, it really felt like a neighborhood school. At least half a dozen of my classmates lived within 3 blocks between my house and the campus. But it does not feel like that as much anymore. It really is a commuter school, and if you go by the school during rush hour, during after school or before school, especially in the evenings, you realize that it draws a lot of its population from other parts of the Twin Cities, including the suburbs. The impacts on the neighborhood, therefore, are in a large part negative, despite the fact that nobody in the neighborhood disagrees with the fact that Minnehaha provides a very worthy education and has a very strong legitimate need to rebuild and wants the school to stay in the neighborhood. But the process is the main issue here. The administration has been, I believe, in the view of the majority of the neighborhood and the neighbors, manipulative and precipitous in this process. And what the neighbors are asking is to have the process slow down, to return agency to the neighborhood, and ask and allow the neighborhood to actually have more input into the design process. That's what we asked the committee to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, I'm Serafina Shiel. I'm a mother of a child who goes to Minnehaha. My stepdaughter graduated from there. I just wanted to say that having a school located in an urban neighborhood, there will always be concerns with traffic and parking. This school has existed in the same size, in the same place, and these concerns are nothing new from what existed before. It's a school in an urban setting that educates children, and there are naturally going to be challenges that are associated with the density of a school in a neighborhood like that. But 60% of the students live in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the balance in the surrounding communities. The typical school year averages 190 days, which is about 52% of the year. And for the remainder of the year, those peak rush hours don't exist. Given this delicate issue, alternative ways have been identified to address transportation through busing, carpooling, biking. I think the transportation issues are solvable, and they're nothing that should delay the rebuild for this school that has been existing there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Ann Puglisi. I live at 273 Minnesota Avenue in Roseville. My sister lives at 3022 47th Avenue South. We've been neighbors of the Academy for 65 years. What I'm having a struggle with is some questions to ask. How does it come to this, that the developers and designers can go beyond the variant? Why are variances needed? Why don't they stick within the limits of what the city already asked for? You people are, I'm sorry, that doesn't sound quite right. I'm asking for you to oppose as is, because we have a number of issues that we want to protect the critical corridor at the Mississippi River, and you guys are the last defense against that. So I'm not as. I just ask you to consider the appeal and oppose the critical use permit.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there any comments or questions from my council member? Councilmember Gordon.
I have a few comments. I'll try not to go on at too great of a length, though I realize that it's been a long morning and into the afternoon. I'm a council member that represents this area, and I have to say that this is a big deal for this community, starting from when the explosion occurred and where we are right now, and obviously, and I really appreciate my colleagues up here for taking the time to work on this. Also, the assistance that we've got from the planning department and the city attorney's office and others as we're working our way through this and to this point of the appeal. This is a project that I got very involved with, I guess, when it came forward, because I recognized what a big deal that it was. Pushed to make sure there were some community meetings, instructed my staff to get more engaged in this work group and task force that formed to try to look at how we could improve it and mitigate some of the concerns and legitimate concerns that came up along the way. I think that when it got to the Planning Commission, there were some conditions that got added that were very important and helpful to this, some that actually were brought up in the appeal and some of those issues there. I thought about this a great deal, and I've listened very carefully, and it's my intention to move to deny the appeal and add some conditions on number 3 and to accept the appeal and also add a really clear condition on number 4. And for those of you who don't remember, number 3 is the broader concern about the conditional use permits and the variance for the parking. And number 4 was more narrowly focused on the 47th access. There are some copies of the, while you've been talking, I've been communicating electronically with my staff, and we've developed some conditions that I want to bring forward and present. If that's all right with you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll move to those. Just prefacing it by saying, thinking about whether making the findings necessary to deny the project going forward with everything I knew, it didn't seem like I could find a rational basis for doing that, for denying the conditional use permit for the height and for the K-12 school that had existed for so long, and even for the parking lot and the variance. I know that it's unusual to think you can have parking in front of your building, but there are kind of more than one fronts to this property in this building, and it's very large, and I think there are unique circumstances to it. They're actually even reducing the number of parking spaces in that front parking lot that we're worried about as well. But so I want to move on to the conditions and so to read through those, and then we can certainly discuss them more. The first one.
Just a quick thing
Yep.
for those in the audience, there are copies up by the clerk if you're interested.
And if there's not enough, and if it looks like we need some more, I'm sure we can have somebody bring some more in a minute who might be listening into this conversation. And maybe we do need a few more. So the first condition is that the height of the proposed steeple shall be reduced to 59 feet 6 inches. Clearly that's already been indicated, but it was approved at 64. The second is that the 2 classroom buildings shall be no higher than 46 feet. Those were required at 53. Those were approved at 53 feet 8 inches. The third is the applicant shall consult with the National Park Service to ensure that the materials and colors utilized for the exterior of the proposed additional buildings shall be natural and subdued in appearance to create visual continuity with the established natural tree line as viewed from the Mississippi River Trail. For those of you who studied this very carefully, you'll recognize a lot of that language. It was what the National Park Service was asking for. Fourth condition, having to do with the height conditional use permit, is that the applicant shall work with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to provide native trees and other plantings to be planted in an existing open area on the eastern portion of the site to provide additional screening of the proposed addition. This was also an area that was highlighted by the National Park Service. And their letter, there was a circle around it, and I think there's no reason why the Park Board wouldn't welcome some opportunities to add some additional screening. I also want to make an amendment to the a condition that was approved at the Planning Commission having to do with bird safety. It came up in the appeal. We did stipulate that the applicant shall work with CPED staff to identify areas on the first 40 feet of the buildings. I want to eliminate 40 feet and just say on the entirety of the building addition where bird safe glazing as defined by our code shall be incorporated. So it is the entirety of the new building should be bird safe. Also, I want to add a condition to the conditional use permit for the K-12 school. This has to do with parking. Hopefully it's not a condition we're going to come back and review. It's an idea that we've implemented in other areas when people are concerned. I heard concerns again and again about cars exiting, going to the River Parkway, and then getting all backed up. It's not really a controlled intersection there. So this is a solution that might help for the students who are leaving the school and the western parking lot to have a right turn only. They can get to 46th, which is controlled four-way. They can go to there's a light then to get to Lake Street if they want to. Now, we'll see if the theory works, but this is a condition I'd like to add. Then I want to add one more condition to the, or amend a condition that we had on the K-12 school from the Planning Commission. This had to do with plant materials, just adding a section that says, we'll emphasize pollinator-friendly planting. So the entire condition would read, the plant materials and installation and maintenance of the plant materials shall comply with sections 530.200 and 530.210 of the zoning code and shall emphasize pollinator-friendly plantings. For those of you who have a paper copy, if you turn it over, there's actually an addition to Z&P number 4, but why don't I move, if it's appropriate,
yes, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to deny the appeal for number 3 with these added 7 conditions, even though 2 of them are amending previous conditions.
Councilmember Gordon's motion is before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Would you like to go on to the second?
I would like to go on the second, and I would probably like to provide more explanation, but I'll provide it in writing, and I won't go on and on necessarily for my colleagues here and the rest of us. I think there's even another committee meeting that's scheduled to start here in 32 minutes. This has to do with the number 4, which I believe we have to grant the appeal because there was definitely a flaw in the plan. We thought the property line was in a different location for the proposed gate. I believe, though, that everyone is interested in still fulfilling kind of the commitment and agreements were made about access in and out at 47th and had been previously adhered to. So this would be doing that, but adding this condition: parking and loading areas for the K-12 school shall be accessed from 32nd Street East and shall not be accessed from or have access to 47th Avenue South. The Northwest Conference Center may continue to be accessed from 47th Avenue South, but only if there is no internal circulation between the Conference Center parking lot and the K-12 school parking lot. The applicant shall seek an encroachment permit to locate a gate across 47th Avenue South directly to the north of the driveway entrance to the Northwest Conference Center. This is language that the nearby neighbor who raised the concern hasn't necessarily seen. I will just note that between today and the council meeting, there's a number of days, and the council meeting is when any actions this committee takes will be finalized. So there would be a little opportunity there to vet this and make sure it's accurate. When I was looking at the picture that I saw of where the line was drawn for the potential future gate, I think that this is consistent with the language that I've written here to allow for that. But obviously there's work to do there. I'm also happy to hear from the attorney or anybody else who thinks this language is unmanageable. But with that said, I better let the committee vote.
I like that plan. Is there any questions from committee members? Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I've seen Councilmember Gordon's office spend I don't know how many hours kind of negotiating with the school and the community, and I just want to highlight that because I really think that his office has gone above and beyond. And I know these details are really important, but I also just wanted to say that our thoughts have been with the school community ever since the explosion happened. And I know it was traumatic for the parents and the students, and just really a scary and terrifying thing, and that we're really excited to see the school rebuild. This is a very valuable asset to our community, and we're excited to see the future of this building. And again, these details of the design matter, but the community and the school really go beyond the walls of that building. And we want the kids to know that they were really appreciated their presence here. I got the chance to talk with them a bit before the council started and just explain our process to them. And I invited them to come back. I don't know if they will now. Maybe we'll have them come and speak about something more exciting. But anyway, no. But I say that in jest because they were here in a serious way to talk about the future of their school, and we appreciated the time that they took to be here as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Gordon.
Since this sounded a little bit like closing comments, and I'm sure you'll want to adjourn as soon as we vote on this, I just wanted to kind of add and emphasize that that I'm hoping that there will be a lot more working together going forward. There was a condition that the Planning Commission stipulated to, which was to enter into a master planning process. We do know that there are other hopes and dreams that the school might have for the property, and there are definitely other and lingering concerns and issues that I think the community has. And I know in some instances it looks like there's been a big division in the community along this way. But I have to say, I think everybody agrees the River Gorge and the Parkway is absolutely amazing. The residential area in this community is wonderful and vibrant and beautiful, and even how deeply involved and civically active and caring and concerned the neighbors are is part of that. That's incredibly valuable. And also the school is an asset to the city and the community and those who use it and can operate there. So in all likelihood, there's more things that are pulling us to work together to make sure we go forward better to preserve what's most valuable about our communities than there are that dividing us. And I am hoping that these conditions make us more aligned with our comp plan, with the critical corridor river area plan, and what's coming into the future, and will help us, I guess, step forward and move better. And we'll see. But we'll be watching, and I'll be there to help along the way whenever I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other question, I would like to just second Councilmember Bender said and thank Councilmember Gordon for the work that he's done in the community to come to somewhat of an acceptable solution. Without seeing no other questions, Councilmember Gordon's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Still need to vote on the overall appeals and denials. Or are we done? Oh, well then we are done and adjourned. Thank you all. I thought those just amended.